Of course, Mr. President, and the minutes should reflect that Ms. Angus and Mr. Reed are out of the country, and I think Ms. Parker is out of the state. Well, she just got back to the state. She's on her way. And Mr. Fisher may be here later. You have before you an agenda during May 22, 1975. Is there any objection to the agenda before you? If not, we will proceed under the agenda. There are no minutes to approve at this time. Mr. Rowan is here. Mr. Rowan, you have the floor.
I had like 4 things to deal with. The one that's down in the survey draft, I'd like to consider last. The 3 other subjects that I'd like to bring up are, one, a concept that I spoke to some of the commissioners about in terms of a strategy to inaugurate an initiative for the charter. The second one deals with an issue in the research in which I think there's a huge problem with the way the charter is written today. The third is the survey questionnaire, which I have prepared, and it came out of a subcommittee meeting of the commission. And the last is a thought on the communications plan, assuming we're going to have an election. Is there any objection to that list of topics?
No.
Okay. The first... the first notion is that we've all been kicking around for a long time this problem with Eagle River and so on. And in a number of conversations, I've been raising just the possibility of doing something a little different. I was thinking of and this is just in terms of just thinking of the problem politically. I think when we get in the legal game and we try and win all legal battles and so on, everything gets screwed up. The key, in many cases, is to, I think, co-opt the legal questions with a larger political question. And the way I think you can co-opt the case that Eagle River has laid against the commission, and at the same time get unification, if it's possible to do so, is as follows. One, you take the final draft that you finish with in, say, the 10th of June, 5th of June, whenever you're finished your final draft and you're agreed among yourselves as to what you have. And 2, you circulate that as an initiative, and you get as many voters behind.
May I interrupt you? I looked into the legality of putting the charter on as an initiative, which you know, and they tell me it cannot be done.
Yeah, well, Rick has some thoughts to
I
speak to this
wanted
too.
to know whether it can for sure, but I have been given from several sources that it would not be legal as an initiative.
Basically, I agree with that. In line with what we talked about. When I was talking to Mike, we went over some of the factors in the statute that at least raise real serious problems about doing that. And I can go over them in some detail later on, or now if you'd like to.
Go ahead.
My only thought was that, well, as mentioned a couple of them, and what I would say, I hate to be a wet blanket on this. My conclusion is that if the thing were done by initiative and challenged, there's a substantial chance that the challengers would win. There's several reasons for it. First thing you think about is the analogy to the state situation, where it has been held by the state Supreme Court that you can't amend the state constitution by initiative. Reason being, the court said that the Constitution refers to enacting laws by initiative, and that means what laws in that context means things that the legislature can do by itself. It's regular old statute. Second, this sort of conceptual problem. If it were possible to adopt home rule charters by initiative, presumably there wouldn't have been any need to enact unification, a special enabling provision for unification in the first place. And evidently it was thought at that time that special legislation was necessary to do. In the provision dealing with initiative as it relates to municipalities and statutes, there are lots of references to the ordinance or the resolution, which I think could be analogized to the references to law on the state level and would probably be deemed to have the same sort of limited effect. Then there's the other aspect of the local initiative statute, which provides that if the assembly enacts an ordinance substantially the same, as the proposed initiative, then the initiative is of no effect, and that again leads me to believe that what is contemplated is that initiative things and ordinance things are equivalent, essentially. They're meant to be the same character.
I have one thought that I have not explored in this time, and that is if, along with the charter, we put only the names of the present charter commissioners to be re-elected as charter commissioners.
Go ahead.
That you might possibly put present charter commissioners on the ballot for the charter and re-elect
Without resigning.
without anything.
Well, one bombshell after another.
You're telling the workers that the campaign is open again.
Would your remarks apply as well to a referendum in which the assembly is involved? Would there be anything to that?
What sort of referendum?
Well, a referendum is where the
As distinguished from an initiative, where the assembly puts the question to the voters by action.
See, part of the problem, I think, is that the unification statute calls for this special type of majority, dual majority business, and a normal initiative enacted put on the ballot by assembly action, so forth, after division. This is the majority of the whole area. I'm not sure I really see the distinction. You're saying the assembly would adopt a charter?
I'm not suggesting there is a distinction. I'm just asking a question. You said that the initiative process had legal problems. I was asking, what would happen if 15,000 residents of the bowl petitioned the Greater Anchorage Borough Assembly to conduct a referendum, and the Assembly, by resolution or ordinance, whether it is proper, submitted a charter for the petition of the people.
Okay, the term referendum is confusing me because the process you described seems to me an initiative process. Referendum is normally the term used for repealing an act or an ordinance.
No.
Initiative is the way by which the people bypass the legislative body.
Right.
A referendum is when the legislative body asks
Brings the question.
to vote on the question.
Well, okay, that's another use of the word referendum. When we say initiative and referendum, we're talking about, we're using referendum as the people's veto of an ordinance that's already been enacted. You submit an ordinance to referendum with the idea that the people might repeal it by vote. Now you're using referendum in the sense of just a general vote on a proposition. And I'm saying that I don't see the distinction between that sort of referendum and initiative.
Can I ask you a question about law here? Which I don't understand. You've written in your own charter that proposed amendments to this charter may be enacted by the Assembly by ordinance, by a charter commission established in the manner provided by law, or by initiative petition. And, I mean, that's the way you were thinking about it when you sat down to write this thing. Now, what I'm wondering about is, you're saying that there's a statute that sets out a way in which a charter is established, the commission is established, and representatively elected, and duly assigned to deliver a product for a vote, and to bring forth this, the charter to the people. And what I'm saying is that process, even though it's established, okay, it did not eradicate, did it, the capacity of the people of this community or any other community in the state to initiate, and isn't in fact in the initiative power a stronger power than any statute that you could enact, whether by legislature or by assembly. And isn't there a very strong case in this country for the initiative being the strongest route for the solution, even though other routes are available through statutory law? I don't know this, but I'm just speaking from common sense of hanging around government.
What you're saying, really has a lot of sense, makes a lot of sense politically, I think, in terms of the way we feel about the initiative power. But it has been established, and since at the state level, that there are fairly definite limitations on what can be done by initiative. One of them is changing the organic law.
Let me ask you, Shay. Suppose, in the context of the Jordan case, a citizens group sought to intervene and told the Superior Court judge that because of the unique circumstances and the interests of those citizens who paid the implication, they would want, if the judge finds that this commission is not properly constituted, they would want the judge to subject the charter to an initiative of the people or a vote of the people. Could the judge fashion his, or could the judge enter a holding saying, I find that the charter commission is not properly constituted and is not a lawful body, and yet by court decision, in effect, allow the people to vote on the same proposition? That's
Get out my crystal ball here. Actually, who am I to say what could be done by a court? On the other hand, it would seem to me that that would be precisely the same as deciding that we win. Deciding that the charter commission is okay and denying the relief that the plaintiffs seek.
Well, I don't think the document they seek to
Rick, you brought up a really interesting point this afternoon, and I'm not sure I can restate it, but I'll start. And then you jump in. It relates to the fact that an initiative placed on a borough ballot for the purpose of wiping out another governmental entity. Have I sufficiently You explain that.
Well, this is just sort of a conceptual thing. We're tossing this idea around. Mike and I talked about this afternoon, and Sherry and I later. We're thinking what we would be doing, really, if we asked to have the charter adopted by initiative. And I'm saying that normally the initiative power is vested in a municipality, an existing municipality. That's the way the statute speaks of it. A municipality may exercise this power. And it's a legislative act of a particular municipality. And if we were to think of it that way, it would be difficult to conceive how the borough, a borough initiative, could, in the exercise of borough legislative power, act so as to wipe out the city, or vice versa.
The same problem would
What
exist.
if you have an initiative in both places?
No, but the
Matching initiative.
same problem would exist. Suppose there were no local government. I think it's easier to maybe analyze that way. And suppose a bunch of people wanted an initiative without going through the local boundary commission process and so forth.
Wanted a charter.
Oh, any kind of, create any kind of municipal government. That surely the specific steps the statute with the government, in that case,
You mean to incorporate a municipality?
I mean, you couldn't just say, we, the people of Prince William Sound, want to have an initiative to form a local government. You would have to go through the specific steps that are in the municipal code.
Yeah.
And you can see that in the absence of the
That's like the Northborough Borough.
Yeah. So the same, I mean, that sort of bolsters your conclusion.
Well, we, the people of Eagle River, wish to by initiative process remove ourselves from the acreage law.
Maybe we have a parent's idea on them.
No, I think that, a lot of things, I used the word co-op before because, we began to think immediately of what happens if you take this to an initiative, if it gets litigated, okay? Well, okay, I mean, we all get involved in a lot of questionable things in public life, at least. We're all the things, you're all in it right now, where you find out after the fact almost all the time about the law. So, the question is that you have a political mandate, not a legal one, And it seems to me that it's something to consider in any case.
Well, I don't quite understand what we're gaining by going through this way. We didn't finish that where we have what seems to me some very valid legal concerns.
Oh.
So I mean, it seems to me we ought to be able to open and close the door here.
The notion was that if you took this to an initiative, the commission delivered to the assembly its charter. At the same time, 10,000 or 15,000 citizens from all areas of the government area also deliver a petition for an initiative which is identical, word for word, in the charter. And the election is held at the same time at the request.
Or both.
Yeah. So they could both be the same thing. It could be one question, presented by the charter and endorsed by 15,000 people, presented by the people, endorsed by the charter. Now, if during the period of say, July 1 to August 15th, whenever this election is going to take place, the court strikes down the commission, you still got an initiative. It hardly matters. If after the election, let's say it passes, and the court strikes down the commission, it hardly matters whether the commission's been struck down and was improper in writing the charter when in fact 15,000 voters put it on the ballot for their own reasons. You don't need a new unification election to prove that the charter was written properly when you have 15,000. Okay, so that was the strength of it. But the illegal thing sits right in the middle of it.
Well, yeah, I say I don't want to be a total damper on this idea.
Well, the very little lawsuit, anyway.
Yeah, we are.
Well, as a matter of fact, it's looking better and better. I think I can report to the commission as the research goes on.
I'm getting worried. Rick is looking rested. That implies that he's not doing all he could.
And I get rested as my soul finds content and the surety of victory.
I love it.
My dear, June 6th.
The date of the hearing is June 6th. Is that on our
It's
calendar?
on there. I did not know what time though. I'm sorry. So
What
I
time
didn't
is
write
it?
it on your calendar.
9 o'clock in the morning.
Do you know what court?
Judge Moody's courtroom.
Hanging judge.
Is that something else?
Okay.
It's only got 17
Do you want us to be there or do you not want us to be there?
I don't care. I'm happy to have you. Sure.
They didn't think they had a choice last night.
In fact, I'm going to call for recess in the middle of my argument, come back and consult with everybody and see if they have ideas.
It's going to be a long time.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that unless someone can show me a more compelling reason why initiative is the way to go, that we not.
Okay, the motion is that we not proceed unless someone can show Sherry.
Apparently, there's not going to be a motion here.
Do you want to go to the next item, Mike?
Sure.
No, I'm getting rid of this.
Well, you may after that court case has a decision, be thinking about this.
And there may be one just for the strictly positive benefits of having that many people personally involved in support of the charter. Now that might be one of the best. That might be one of the best selling
That was a
things.
terrific side effect of it.
Well,
The surprise element was my favorite.
Because you can actually get out there and
A
get
little hard to
organized.
surprise knocked on 15,000 people's doors.
It's the complete change in course that I thought would be a surprise.
Right.
Can I move on to this second piece? I just want to make an observation about the findings in the first survey as compared to a certain thing that's written in here, which since it's kind of small meeting might be worth talking about. You remember in the first survey, the overwhelming number of people who supported the unification concept and who are obviously going to be behind this charter gave as their spontaneous volunteered reasons the reduction of duplication, the elimination of competition among governments, the hope that the governments would be of less size, and this had effects in two effects, you remember, in direct questions where people thought that indeed the number of employees would probably go down and that the taxes also hopefully would at least not go up, let's say. I find that contradicted by your transitional sentence, which reads, in section C of, section 1602, interim government, part C, persons elected on the charter take office and so on. At the moment the government ceases this. Former cities shall comprise service areas for provision of services rendered by those cities within their respective areas. As of the date of ratification of this charter, each department and agency of each former government shall become a department or agency of the new government. All non-elected elective officers and employees of each former government shall become officers and employees of the new government.
I think we need to work on that.
I think you better rewrite that because all that says is that duplication.
Well, now, wait a minute, if you're gonna have duplication initially, you can't just lock the government up and fire everybody.
Yeah, because they don't have anything real.
I'm not proposing that either.
I think that it is something that we will continually have to speak to during our selling and explain how this works. That once the charter is passed, the two have to work side by side until they can be merged. And the merging point is within the first year. All the merging will have been taking place. There's 10 to 20% drop factor in the employees in both city and borough, and within that length of time, we do expect not only to move from going side by side to merging together and to dropping in size.
Okay, but and everybody that I've talked to has said that. Okay, everybody understands that, but that's not what's here. And,
Well,
and we
what's
have
there-
a communications
No,
problem.
what's there is saying
Yeah.
the minute it is joined, we then walk side by side. And if you continue in reading that, you have to come to the merge.
Mary, I think what the problem is that what you're stating is contained in section 1604,
Right.
organization of the executive branch. Mike's problem is that some people may read 1602 and miss 1604.
All you can do is pull that right out, man,
Well,
and use
if
it
it's
again.
all out, let it stand on its own feet, and some people are gonna read those, there's gonna be a wholesale canning over there too. And they're gonna start fighting.
Not if you leave.
People are gonna say, we're gonna be out of jobs.
Not if you leave all the rest in. Not if you leave
Well,
1604B
then
in.
the rest in, that applies to what you just said.
Well, I'm just talking communications thing for
I'll keep our other one of this.
No, I think it's already been pointed out. I think we have to, and I'm sure we would have really serious legal problems, we have to protect people's rights. We can't take them away by the charter. But I do think that we can soften and change that by bringing in some of the things from 1604, whether it's pending reorganization or other. Or maybe change it from 2 sections to 1 section so that they get the idea that the minute the charter is passed, we're then moving parallel and merging.
As long as it's a little more vague, it looks now.
Mr. Chairman, one of the vehicles that we plan to use all along is commission comments, and I think that along with the softening in the charter, can go the comment that we found out that there's attrition rate within the government, and that attrition rate will in large part take care of the elimination of employees
As we reorganize.
But see, I don't think you put that,
Not in the charter.
but you don't write that down, that's in your...
That's commission comments.
Maybe. Thank you, Mike. Is there anyone else who wants to address this point? If not, do you want to move on to your third item?
We met, the survey committee met and talked about what was possible to do in the next survey. And as a general conclusion, we were pretty much agreed that if you're moving to an August vote, which I hope you are, that really, while we planned this for 3 surveys, I think that we've learned a great deal with the first survey in terms of this thing. And I have a survey here that takes the charter as written to the public, and I think really gets that feedback, and which would be prepared by the 1st of July 4th or so. And from that point, I think we should retain the option of, in research of using a panel-based system over the next 5 or 6 weeks, but that we should seriously entertain not doing a third in-depth survey for a number of reasons. One, we learned way more in this first one than I thought we were going to get at, and the charter seems to me to be falling into an area that's very simple to measure. Okay, there are some complicated issues that we're going to have to follow. We'll get into in a minute. But other than the Eagle River thing, it seems to me that this is not as difficult a research problem as I anticipated in the beginning, and that a third in-depth survey may certainly not be necessary. If we go and do this one now, we'll have a report on that at a time when hopefully we'd be getting into a communications plan. And this is something that's really serious because the commission has taken individual effort to get its story out. But I think we'll find even in the second phase that a lot of even with the council, the number of people who read that, I don't know, what the level of information is going to be when we finally get around to, say, the last 30 days before people have to vote. And I think it's an obligation on our part to make sure that the level of information in the public is at least high enough, whether pro or anti, is at least high enough and informed enough where a legitimate decision can be made. So I'm seeing this survey as a tool for trying to gauge what kind of information program you have to put out. This may mean, it means a plan has to be written. That's what it means. There are people to use. There's a tremendous amount of news capability that could be put together if the Charter Commission itself could be put together. There's a lot of stuff we could release from the research. There are a lot of intent resolutions that you may want to pass Each of these, it seems to me, should be structured, sequenced, thought out strategically and planned so that you make maximum effect and so on. And that's what I'm thinking of this survey. We'll try and frame that for you so that in July and August we can do that.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether it would be appropriate, possibly not right at this moment, but I do think that as a group, we need to go over what happened at the Borough Assembly and some conversations that I had after that as to this question of timing. And whenever that's appropriate, it might well be that these questions could be appropriate at a later time.
If we're going to be reacting to this item of polling, it's probably relevant to what it is
Was everybody there except Joe before the Borough Assembly?
Joe was the only one.
Yeah, the only one missing.
No
Basically,
point going into it then, what's the point of this subject?
well, the thing of it, at that meeting, basically, I think what came out of it, we asked the Assembly if they wouldn't instruct Joe DeGore to move ahead to look into the reapportionment both for single-member and multi-member districts. Also had some indication from Gary Thurlow that night, Rick was not in attendance, that he felt it would be possible, say on the August 12th election, to have an item by the borough, kind of an either-or thing, that if the charter failed, the charter would adopt the reapportionment plan that the public opted for. If the charter failed, then it would be the reapportionment plan for the Borough Assembly to move on. Well, in the course of the conversation, a little bit of fireworks engendered between the two opposite ends of the table, one Mr. Rose and the other Mrs. Frumney. Mr. Rose saying, in effect, that I will go out and I will work against the charter if we have anything other than a multi-member district. Mrs. Frumney alluding to the initiative and the fact that she would, have to see a single member. We have here, and there was some concern expressed at that meeting and also later in talking to some of the members, a very serious feeling that if this reapportionment issue gets muddied with the charter, that we are going to have some very real problems in selling the charter. Some feeling on the part of some of the assembly persons that it should be a separate issue as far as the reapportionment, possibly at the August 12th and then a later date on the charter so that the issue is through. But we have a very dangerous situation, it seems to me, and I look to Mary here, and I suppose to Dave Rose, and he's not here. If we allow this reapportionment issue to gut this whole thing, all of the things we're doing here, just so much whistling. And I don't know how we can sit here and make a decision with everybody having 1/11 of the vote, and if you have 6, you've got a majority and something happens. And the Assembly, the same way. But if certain influential members, Mr. Rose, Mrs. Froning, or maybe others, go out and fight that charter and fight it, in addition to the legal problems we have, I think we're going to lose the war. And I think that all that we might want to do on Mike Rowlands and a positive thing is just so much, pardon the expression, damn garbage. We're going to lose it if we can't solve that reapportionment issue. And I think it's just a key to what we're doing.
What the Charter Commission witnessed the other evening is the fact that Dave Rose is so upset over the fact that I managed to get Jesse in as president, that he is going to fight me for the rest of the time he's on there, and anything that he thinks is dear to my heart.
Mary, you're fighting us, though.
And I have told you folks from the first that I could not back the charter if it did not have single-man districts. I've told all of you from the first. I told the folks that elected me in that I would. I have suggested to you folks to separate it from the charter so I would not have to fight the charter. And if we put it on the ballot, the two things, multiple man and single man district, I have said I would be fighting for the charter. Now, Mr. Rose, when we went to reapportionment before, said that the people should not be given a choice. They should only be given a multiple man district. And that's what he fought for before. Now, many folks voted for the multiple man district as a compromise because they were determined that the charter would give them another chance to come up with a single man district. And if we don't see that the charter gives them another chance to say whether or not they want a single man district or whether or not they want a multiple man district, then we are in trouble. I say let's separate it from the charter so that we can all be fighting for the charter.
Now, when you say separate, you mean at a different election? Or
No. Just allow both multiple man and single man go on separately and say the charter will adopt what the people decide they want in the way of apportionment. And that I can fight for. I don't want to be fighting against you. I have told you folks this from the beginning.
Anyone want to address this point besides Mrs. Sturgis?
Well,
Mrs. Coney?
Mr. Chairman, I think we better settle this point. It's one that can't be left in the air. Because if we don't settle this and we're not a unified commission, what all is saying is very true. We're going to end up getting our heads bashed in. So we better settle this pronto as to which way we're going to go.
You see, the previous assembly tried to co-opt people's decision and give them no choice.
Well,
And we don't want to do that here, I don't believe.
Mrs. Sturgis?
No, the only thing, and the only reason really I brought it up, I think it's very basic to what we're going to do. I think that we have to, there's been some indication in talking to some of the assembly persons that they would possibly feel that is their responsibility to take it upon their shoulders to make the decision as to the reinforcement, that they would fight it on the floor, so to speak.
What was we've heard from Mrs. Coney, who was here, regarding the possibility that the voters would be given a choice. What is Mr. Rose's current view of that? Is it your understanding he would fight
He
the
would-
charter if the people
well,
were given a choice?
This is what he said.
He didn't say that
He did not say that. He did not say that. He said they should not be given the choice.
That's what I understood you said.
He said they should not be given a choice. Now that's Mr. Rose.
Mr. Rose said to me that he would fight the charter if it contained single-member districts.
All right.
I said I talked to people afterwards. I don't know whether that's true or not.
Well, speaking for myself, I have no problem, except the problem I mentioned before, earlier when we were debating this before, about, and maybe I can be persuaded out of it, I suppose for this circumstance I have to be, about having one election where people are given a choice and then have to vote on a charter that they really haven't seen because they haven't seen that element. But I don't have any problem for myself in letting the voters decide what kind of assembly apportionment plan they want. I mean, I don't have that strong a feeling that I'm right and everybody else is wrong, and I would submit that view to the outcome. I don't know how the rest of you feel, though. Fred?
Well, it's a good view, but there's another point here to be considered now. We talk about possibly separating that issue, and that's not going to work too well because there's another issue now. Rose and Lennon and some of these other guys have indicated to me they're going to fight equally hard on the council manager forum situation. So to separate one thing, you're not going to cure anything because they're going to come roaring out of the corner on the council manager situation.
Well,
So next thing you know, we're going to be dissecting this damn charter and we're not going to
I wouldn't support that. Sure.
Mr. Chairman, the distinction there, Fred, is that they don't have to make any decision as an assembly on a form of government, but they do have to make a decision as an assembly on reapportionment in the next few months. And so
Well, you got a point there, you know.
I think that's...
Bill?
You know, I've always felt that, you know, whether you're for or against multi or single or city manager or mayor or whatever it is, I think that the charter needs to go ahead as one thing and negative reaction, you're gonna lose it. I just don't feel that you can do that. I think you have to go in one way. Now, whether we go in later with our charter after this has been battled out of August by the borough, fine, that's great for me. But I just think that you need to go in with a charter that we will have it written and present it as one thing. I don't think we go in with a whole bunch of choices.
Lisa, do you want to speak? Sharon?
Mr. Chairman, this brings on a lot of elections, but one thing that could be done is in late July, have the Assembly go to the voters with the reapportionment plan. And then on September 9th, go in with the charter and adopt whatever the Assembly has done.
Would that allow time to fill the seat in October?
No, it would have to
Then you
push
have
it off to
to
the first Tuesday in November.
Listen, how many people would come out and vote?
On the other hand, we don't have any choice as to what we're
It
doing,
would be
do we?
re-elections.
Pardon?
We have no choice as a commission as to what when the borough.
Oh, yes, I think they're interested in,
Do we have some?
Oh, I hope the Assembly is wanting to cooperate as much as we can.
Mr. Fisher?
I'm sorry, I was late, I have no meeting. I don't know if you discussed this, but, you know, the litigation is a problem in my mind, and I raised this the other night for those who weren't there. It's beginning to look an awful lot like you to an October ballot. You know, because it looks like we will be rid of the litigation by then. And if we are not, if it's pending, I think it will cause the issue.
Mr. Chairman, Dick, couldn't you outline for Rick and Joe what the timetable that we saw possibly on that litigation? I think
Well, they probably know the timetable better than I. And is that correct, as you, Joe and Rick would see it, that if we're on October ballot, that the litigation would be,
You mean being rid of litigation in the Supreme Court of Alaska? or-
yeah.
I don't think so.
All right, the feeling was that you would have the July 6th, then you would have 30 days, and
June 6th. June 6th is the argument.
and then 2 weeks later, you'd have that, then 30 days you would have for appeal, and that the Supreme Court could perhaps be talked into staying the election or otherwise. That was some
Well,
feeling.
you got 30 days, I think, but that doesn't cover your brief filing period. You would really be exhausted close to 90 days just to file briefs unless you went on an accelerated schedule.
Yeah, you can, depending on how cooperative council are, and I assume they'd be cooperative in this case, it's possible to shorten all the various briefing periods and so forth set up by the rules. It is possible to have an argument, you know, it's definitely possible to have argument in the Supreme Court by, early October. But decision,
Joe, you or Rick, you feel that either way the initial court case comes out, it'll go to the Supreme Court? Sure. Fair enough.
Fred?
Well,
Finish your
I
thought.
would like to, thank you very much. Appreciate that. You know, the thing is, what is the, and I'm glad Mike's here because I kind of like his thinking on this one. What is the situation if we go to the ballot with this court case hanging over our heads? It seems to me it is a negative argument. And a good one. It could have an effect on the outcome of the election. And even if we have to, even if we go ahead and let the municipality just go ahead, I'm trying to separate this a little bit from the apportionment issue, but obviously it has a bearing on it. Even if we let the charter commission election go until, or the charter election go until November or December, it seems to me that's better than having it come up with a point where this litigation is still pending.
The assumption that I'd like Mike to comment on and others is that it's a negative to have the court case pending. I'm not sure that's true.
No.
The court case may, the position of the court case
Yeah, I agree.
may be more negative, that That is, the Eagle River people may be more bitter that they lost. I don't know what their views are, but that's a possibility. The fact that we're under siege by litigation may rally people outside of the
We are the underdog right now.
That's the reason for the petition working.
You know, one of the strongest things I was going to say, people really keep asking me, and I wonder if any of you have had this, how is the commission working? Is it representative? And people are really interested in us as individual commission members. And I am scared to death. I think I would rather have 20 lions out there screaming at us, you know, Eagle River Lions and all the rest of the lions, rather than to have this commission seem other than what it is today, which is a group that I've heard some very positive comments, and I'm very fearful of this, more fearful of the reapportionment issue, and having, say, you know, marry you out, as opposed to,
I'm begging you to separate it
as
from
opposed
the
to
charter.
problems we might get from the legal issue. I think that's more important than the other.
I have to second what Alan said and add to it that we were elected to come up with a decision and not elected on the basis of going back to the people and saying, now, we have another choice. We're supposed to make that choice. I would recommend, Mary, that as we had originally discussed this thing, that we go through our public hearings and everything else and then take a definitive stand after the public hearings. Because I think all of us have agreed, if at the public hearing there is substantiation enough that we're going to go single member, I think we're all going to agree and change it. But I think to split ourselves apart now and take some very definite attitudes.
Well, is there any, I don't understand what's happened since last time that I was here.
Mary wants an initiative.
But I understood from
I said that there was an initiative that was going to be on if the charter did not have single-man district in it.
That's right.
That's all.
And so, I inferred that you were forbearing in that respect until you saw the final version of the
I
charter.
have been trying to be.
What do you mean?
The folks that are ready to go with the petition have said, tell us when we should go on it. And I will have to tell you that it will have to go by the end of June because of the timing for an initiative.
That's more than anything else.
Well,
And I don't wish to have it because I do think that it could be divisive. But if we could agree that either by asking the thing to be separated from the charter and having both on, or that it did have the single man in the charter, whichever, after you've heard hearings, that you decide is the proper way to go, then we really aren't divided.
there are, I guess, three possibilities. One is that the charter will provide to vote on that proposition or will abide by a vote put on by the Assembly. And the third is that the Commission will go for single-member districts in the last charter. 2 out of 3 of those options are satisfactory to you, as I understand it. That is the vote of the people or a single-member district in the charter.
That's
Correct?
right.
And we agreed, as I remember, that we would make that decision after the hearings of the week of June 3, correct?
There's another.
Is there anything that's changed that now makes it mandatory that we anticipate those hearings?
I think what started this whole thing is the question of timing, which has precipitated this. The other option, of course, would be that the Assembly handles the reapportionment issue. Mary's group and may still go forward with their petition if the Assembly, for instance, decided just to put one on the matter. Okay, and then we would adopt whatever that ultimate decision was. So I think that's a fourth alternative.
Let me speak to that one first. There is a tendency among an elected body, when they have been elected by one method or another, whether it's single man or multiple man, or at large, to think that's the method to be elected by. The present Assembly has been elected from multiple man districts. There is the possibility with the present Assembly that they will only put on a multiple man district. I have told them the same as I have told you, that there isn't an initiative, and the initiative will go if they don't put the choice on also. Now, if it does go by an initiative and they refuse to respect the request for a referendum, if there is a special apportionment election before October 1st, if they do not respect the people's request for it to be put on along with it as a referendum, then it will still go on as an initiative in October, even after they have elected perhaps a multiple man district in August. Because an initiative
Is that man?
goes on the general election, and the general election is October.
If we had agreed, as we did, that we would have, that these hearings would be significant as far as how we would district. In other words, we were going to be influenced in our minds by the kind of testimony that we get, maybe the volume of testimony as well as its quality. Then it seems to me that we would also agree that we would be influenced by a vote of the people. I don't know how you can say that we are open to the input we get at a hearing, but which is not necessarily representative, but we wouldn't be open to what we get at a vote. Is there anything to be said for that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if we're whipping this thing to death, but I don't know if we have anything to whip. Before we come around to that, I was interested in asking that one question. I'll abide by Mike and your opinion, whoever, that we just blow off with an earlier ballot while the litigation is pending. I think the government is in jeopardy until the litigation is complete. But it certainly doesn't prevent us from having the election and having a unification charter before the people and voting up or down. It's voted favorably. The government is probably in jeopardy. Its being is probably in jeopardy until the litigation is complete. It seems to me that if you assume that the pending litigation isn't going to, or is going to affect the outcome of the election positively, then we're back to where we are now. And it seems to me that we must proceed forward and be influenced by not only that testimony, but everything that happens between now and when we make that decision. For instance, the Assembly may very well make some decisions for us. And I think as now we will be influenced also by the present makeup or the future apportionment that may take place between now and when we make this next decision. So it seems to me that really we're just batting the breeze at the moment, and we should proceed forward.
Well, what are you saying, Dick?
Well, we should proceed forward just as if we were
Toward
have our hearings and recommend that August ballot. Seems to me that's the alternative.
You still haven't answered the question. You've avoided the question.
No, I don't know.
What's the question? I don't.
Well, what I'm trying to find out is whether you folks will either recommend to the Assembly that if you folks decide you must have a multiple man district on the ballot somewhere, if it goes that direction, would you recommend to the Assembly to separate it from the charter so that I do not have to fight the charter, which I do not want to do?
Well, I'm not sure I understand. Let me try this with
If what I'm trying to explain is if this group recommends that there be both questions on the ballot separate from the charter, I'm reasonably sure that the Assembly will go along with it.
Well, maybe your problem is, the thing I don't understand is the timing problem.
It is the timing problem.
Okay, because when we were here before, you and I did not prevail on this issue of single divisions. All right. And we implored the majority at that time, a temporal majority, I hope, that they be open-minded in the June hearings and approach the issue with a fresh point of view after those hearings. And they agreed to do that. With that in mind, I don't know what position we're in now if we now ask the body to make some commitments before those hearings that we pointed out were critical even occur. And that's...
All right.
Now, what is the timing problem?
All right. The timing problem.
Mr. Fisher said.
The timing problem that I was not aware of at that time, I thought that I could put off until
middle of July on the initiative thing. I thought I'd postpone it until then. It now looks like it has to go by the end of June.
Be completed or be done?
Be completed.
How many signatures are required?
Only 2,000. I figure we can have them in less than a week.
Well,
Hearings are on June 5th.
the hearings are completed June 5th. What if we address this question on the week, what if we agreed to address this question on the week of June 9th? And
Then we're
resolve-
all right. Then we're all right. But if you put off the decision until the 15th of June, we would have had to have begun, you see.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I can articulate what it is that's bothering me, and maybe it's bothering RLS, and I don't know what the resolution to it is, but if I were a political cartoonist, and I watched a TV program the other night about political cartoonists, so it's fresh in my mind, I would draw a picture of the Charter Commission sitting around the hearing table for our next 6 hearings, with our open ears waiting for input from the citizenry, with a great big anvil over our heads on a fraying rope that says initiative on it. And that's my feeling right now. My feeling is we're listening to what the people say, and so long as the input is single-member districts, the rope's going to stay intact and things aren't going to come crashing down.
Now, if I were doing a cartoon for the morning paper, I would have Mr. Rose in the cartoon with his anvil too. I mean, I think it's a washout.
No, I'm not saying whose anvil it is.
It's Jane.
Initiative, they both
Jane is.
I'm using the hammer, so
You know,
I'm the anvil and the other people are the hammer.
I'm feeling most uncomfortable about this. I'm feeling pressured. I'm feeling threatened.
I know, but I think that's part of the I don't know. Mr. We can't control that.
Maybe it is part of the process.
Yeah, but-
Maybe we can't control
Rich?
it.
Yeah, it is a difficult problem. I think, but, I try to ignore Mary, frankly. And I'm sorry, Mary, but I really, I don't, I don't want to
I have been truthful with you as to what the moves are going to be from the beginning.
I don't want to get angry and say,
Is
I'm
that
going
why
to stick
you
with it.
ran Mary the only damn reason?
I got real peeved when folks said they were not going to listen and that things were going the other way. Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I for one, while there's pressure, enjoy this work, and there's pressure from both sides, and both sides are using essentially reciprocal techniques, and I think we just have to go through the hearings and make a judgment, and if we make people unhappy on one side or the other, that's a risk we run, and that may be inevitable, but
Mr. Chairman, the basic issue, however, is still the question of the timing, and that is why I brought it up, and this other comes because it's a very emotional issue, and one about which Sherry is very angry, and I know I'm very angry inside. But it seems to me that if we move ahead, we need to talk about dates. Now, otherwise, we have to put this off to make that decision also on June 5th. If we, for instance, go for let the Assembly bring their reapportionment issue up and then go for an October charter, we obviously are going to do a different thing insofar, I would think, of the timing, possibly, of your survey. Is that not correct, Mike?
I think it depends on how you think about this thing you just put out. If you look at the piece I have, I'm really following on the fact that in the last couple of days, everybody's gotten a charter in their hands, and it's a good time to talk to them about this subject. If you felt that no matter what the timing difference between now and the time you finally go to an election is, I mean, it wouldn't matter too much in terms of measuring what you have, unless what you imagine you're going to do is radically change what you've got. So some of the issues will disappear. I think it would be easy to look at this and say, well, that fits now, or that would be better later.
well, maybe this should just be done in the usual order of things, but
we agreed that on our first meeting after the hearings, which could even be the 7th of June or the 9th or 10th of June, that the first matter we would take up would be the apportionment provisions, and that we would, with the hearing testimony fresh in our minds, whatever it is, either reaffirm what is in the first draft, move to a single member proposition, or go to the option either with the Borough Assembly doing it or a charter commission sponsored referendum on apportionment. Wouldn't that meet, it meets Mrs. Froney's
It's no problem with me. It was only if you immediately move to this. I think that would be an appropriate way to go, frankly.
I think this avoids the fight, and which is what I'd like to do.
Well, shall I pass these out then and at least look at this and see what
We do have the minutes reflect from Mr. Reed's use that the consensus here was that we would take up these various propositions on legislative apportionment at our first meeting as the first item following the public hearing.
Here we have have you got one of these? Let me run through this, okay? Yes, sure.
I appreciate it. Go on.
This follows directly the brief. This being introduced, as you can see, a little differently than the first one. I think we'll get a much better reaction from this kind of thing. Conducting a short interview with Anchorage area residents. As you know, the Charter Commission has written the first draft of the Constitution for new local government here. We'd appreciate your thoughts and opinions about specific issues raised in that Constitution. The results of this survey will be used by the Commission to refine its Constitution and bring to the people the best possible product. If the respondent is in Eagle River, we recognize that Eagle River is making an effort to organize its own government, but while that is not yet settled, we'd like your thoughts about the charter, okay? Now, as you can see, we give people a brief summary of constitutional provisions. The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you'll all recognize because they're taken directly.
Are we looking at these as you're whipping through?
Yeah.
You've been whipping there more
No,
than
you see, you know these words already because they're taken directly from your from the highlights
But
in
they seem
the.
fresh and new.
So you might sound different than they read.
This reads better than our charter.
Yeah.
How do you know if an assemblyman is the answer to our problem?
And number 2, by the way, I'm going to get rid of. I don't know why that's put in there. We know that that's no problem. The name and the spelling.
Yeah, that is kind of dumb.
Yeah, I mean, all the rest, it's important. I think to find out if there's opposition or strong opposition to each of these things. For example, Mary, it would be very interesting in number 3 to find, with all the data we do have in single-member districts, how people are going to answer this question in terms of opposed, strongly opposed, and the whys.
You mean on number 3?
Number 3 and number 4.
On things like this, when you say if opposed or strongly opposed, why? If there's support in this why again, then it's just important to know why the support is going to be opposed to.
Well, we have a lot of information on some of these things already in the pro and con reasons in the first survey. But as things change, I think the thing that becomes of interest is opposition, not, I mean, I think we know why people support, you know? And that really, we're talking about getting something back in the first week of July. And we're talking about communicating to them for, 30 days or 40 days. So we're really just trying to find out who's against and why. And maybe that will influence at least the way we talk to them, if not.
Am I heard?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, of course.
Sure.
Question.
What is your plan for community taking in Eagle River and Cheviot?
What I want to do is take the sample that we had originally, increase it by about 5% in number. So that was the idea anyhow, to increase generally. And then add Eagle River proportionately to that, which would put about almost a couple dozen interviews out in that area.
Would you have any special questions there, though, about
Oh yeah,
whether
Yeah, what's on the other end?
there are. It gets into that, Joe.
Well, you refer in 34 to the action of the Eagle River people and
Yeah,
the
we should
local
talk
effort
about
of
it.
Eagle River. I don't know whether we're agreed on that characterization. I mean, whether
Well, let's go through this because we have two frames to this thing. From question 1 all the way to... Yeah, okay.
Question on 7. Do you think it's important enough, it is a deviation from before, that we are calling for all the school board members to be elected?
Yes. This is covered in a later question.
Oh, you do have it again?
Yeah.
Okay.
I came back to that. Yeah.
Okay.
Here I'm just raising exactly
Okay,
what you
fine.
have and asking
Okay.
propositions. Then I'm coming back to issues that are raised in some of these.
Can you tell me what you mean by
On number 11, top of page 3, I was really kind of shocked this morning when I read it. I really thought that we voted to say that an ombudsman may be created by this city. And here it says it will. And I didn't think that was the way we done it.
I don't know. It's
Not really because I was opposed to an ombudsman, but I thought it said may.
The paper also said we were electing a partisan government. I called.
Yeah, well, how is it really in the minutes? So how is it in the charter? I have no idea.
No, in the
I'm not
charter.
interested in what the paper thinks, but I'm
It's
interested.
the charter.
Yeah, but I'm not sure
Okay.
that's right.
Oh, that's exactly how it was voted. Sure.
There is a statute.
There's a statute.
I think that's right,
Otherwise, we would debate this putting it in.
I think we deferred decision on the ombudsman when we went through the first time. And we came back to it, and that may have been at the time that you were gone, but I thought you were here that night, and we
You're the only one
allowed
that voted against it. I think you're the only one that voted against it. I think you were there.
I just thought it said may, and I,
Well, as I recall, there was no reason to put it in if it said may. The only reason to put it in was to mandate it.
no, I can remember the discussion. We were, at least in one round, it was going to be put in at may just so it would be there, but was not mandatory.
I can tell you in just a second, I think.
Well, my change on this question was actually to direct the question a little bit by explaining what an ombudsman was by getting the directly handling important citizen complaints. I mean, I think you have to say something about an ombudsman.
Well, I may just have to get a referendum or initiative, I guess. Mary, you stay away from my supervisor.
Have at it.
I'll start the initiative council. Okay, 13 is service areas, 15 is the agency and department thing.
Maybe interrupt you as you go along.
Yeah, sure.
I'm talking about specific items as you bring them up. What are you trying to find out with 13, 14, 15, 16? It seems to me those are not issues.
I think 15 is the key issue. Yeah, you weren't here before. When I made a point when we were here before that and I come back to this later in another question, where we asked,
I don't believe that our service area said that. I think we very carefully didn't say what you have said in 13.
In 13.
Yeah.
number 50 reads, let me just deal with this, Mary, and we'll go to number 50 reads, would you be more inclined to vote for a charter if you knew that by the ratification of it, the size of the local government, the number of employees, and the number of agencies would necessarily be reduced? Now, there are two pieces of evidence here that are interesting. One is that the common understanding I get from all the commissioners here and people who study what's going to happen when you unify the government is that the number of employees is going to have some kind of an attrition. The number of agencies, because of the duplicate thing, is probably going to become less, right? And so these numbers may be, they're unknown now, right? Yeah, hopefully. I think everybody's interested in that, hopefully. Now, and we know that the public is behind that, right? But the problem I raised before was that in 1602C, it reads, each department and agency of each form of government shall become a department or agency of the new government. All non-elected officers and employees of each form of government shall become officers and employees of the new government. So it sounds like, I mean, if I were in a campaign against you, I've kind of sense that I would use.
But on the other hand, number 15 has a question. It's not really an accurate portrayal.
Because at a point...
It's a transitional item.
Yeah.
It's not in the charter.
It's not something that we intend. I mean,
Well,
it's,
maybe then,
I mean, it's in the transitional article. If you want to say, as a transition until the mayor develops his administrative code, each agency and department.
But then it loses its validity as a question.
No, I don't think, I think that 15 is a bad one.
Why do we have to get into this much detail? Why can't we stay with a couple of main things and just use those? Why do we get into all this specific detail?
tell me which question here is most
Well,
important. Let's use that.
Take this one here, you're talking 15.
All right.
I mean, what does that contribute?
Well,
Mike, if we were to change that question, as Joe has indicated, to qualify by saying that, after they, until such
Within
thing
the
happens,
first year.
okay. Then does it have validity as a question?
yeah, but there are two levels here. One is that you're writing a legal constitution, and two is I'm approaching this as a communications consultant. Really, I'm in research and communications. You're saying that this doesn't say what this question says. I'm telling you that this says what I have written here. It says that each agency and department of the previous government will become an agency or department of the new government. It's true. I mean, literally true. If you want to go argue this with the public, go ahead and do it. That there's going to be a transition, and that actually the mayor is going to make his own plan, and the possibility is going to be an attrition, and it's going to that's a very complicated answer.
Mr. Shaw, I want to recognize Mr. Shaw because he was sort of on the floor.
I'm sorry. The point I want to make is, we know this subject well, but the people that are recipients of this survey, they do not know the difference between multi-district or single member. They don't know the difference between a strong mayor form and whatnot. Outside of a few, the majority of them. And if you go out, I've done this, I've gone out and asked my neighbors, what is the difference between multi and single member? They don't know. I've asked them, what is the difference between the mayor form of government and a council manager? They don't know. I explain it to them, and they say, oh, well, this is the one I want. You really have to explain these things to them because they're not as knowledgeable as we are. And this thing is directed in a knowledgeable person.
I couldn't agree with you more in the sense that your major problem at this point in the commission is communication.
And education. The fact
point that you're
public is
making
not
is
that
that people
educated.
don't understand your chart. Right.
Well, but Sherry wanted to be recognized, Bill, and I'll go around.
Mike, there are a couple of things that occur to me. in these questions, we are testing people's perceptions of what we've written in the charter. Now, most of the things adequately reflect not only what's written in the charter, but our intent
Right.
in writing those things in the charter. I think our argument with number 15 is that while it may represent what's written in the charter, it does not represent the
Right.
intent. Now, we've agreed with you, we intend to change it,
Yeah.
and so I see no reason to test it, and I see, in fact, a negative aspect to test it, because by putting it in here to test it, we're actually saying it was our intent to say this. What do you think of this intent?
Right.
And so I would
I'd like-
suggest that we...
Eliminate.
Well, Sherry said, exactly what I was going to say, that, the thing is that you put it in here, and Micah, and we're going to have to tell you what we're going to want in this thing. We have to understand that. And I don't think that this says what we intended, and Sherry said exactly true, because this is not what we want. Now, I'm not so sure that,
Cross it out right now.
papers, I don't know if I...
We're watching.
And the thing is, see, I don't know if we necessarily agree with you anyway, over time ourselves do anyway, but I think that there are things that we are asking that may be perfectly legal but need not be asked. And I think that the people, I don't know what they're voting on, but I agree with Fred that 80% of them don't. And I think that we need to somewhat carry a low profile. I think you want to carry a high profile. I think we should carry a low profile, so that's where you and I might differ if we do differ. I think that asking certain questions gets you in trouble.
Mr. Fisher? Yeah, I don't subscribe to that here. But anyway, how can we change this,
How do you get rid of it?
your sentence to, in the charter document itself? I mean, are we addressing ourselves to the problem that we can't in fact do something about? Sherry mentioned that we...
Maybe you weren't here.
No, I'm sorry.
We sort of talked about doing two things. One, softening it by making reference to something that's said later, in a later section, about how until the code of ordinances is adopted, that these will remain agencies. And so if we bring that reference up and say it also when we say that the agencies are retained, and then also in commission comments, make reference to the attrition rate and how we figure within a year we'll lose so many people.
Mr. Chairman.
Mary, and then
On 13, we did not say this in the charter. We did not say for the provision of public services by the municipality. We have provided for public services to be provided by the municipality or through community councils. And we have left it open to provide services via voucher system if it were wished later. So it's not just provision of services by the municipality.
So if we strike the phrase by the municipality, it's still...
For the provision of services is all right, but it should not be by the municipality necessarily. It may be.
Lisa Parker?
What Bill said about carrying low profile, even maybe we should do that. And if I was, on the outside, and even being on the inside, I would kind of think, by carrying a low profile, that you guys just still don't mind it.
what's wrong with that? Sherry?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that we need to even get into a discussion of the size of our profile at this point.
I never like to discuss that.
We can, if we, I mean, I if we just look at the questions themselves and decide what things we want to test.
Yeah,
the
do that.
size of the profile is going to
Let's do
solve
that. I agree. Let's do that.
All right, let's proceed.
Let's take 17. You got 15 struck out.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I keep asking the question. I don't think I got that.
We're going to get to the debate. I'm going
You feel that there's some benefit to hearing the public.
All right. Just wait.
Mr. Fisher has the floor.
Please.
Which one did?
Let's have one person talk at a time. Mr. Mike, if
feel there is some benefit to having 13 and we'll get back to truly what's up. To me, it's a non-issue. But maybe you're perceiving it differently.
It was, I took the first group from the summary in your own publication.
No, well, I'm not so sure that I agree that
Okay.
that was an issue in our first publication.
Well, I mean, they were emphasized in the piece that you put out. I think that this is the only thing that people know about the charter, other than the stories in the paper today. And if anything was read, it had to do with the larger print, okay? Or areas that may have, I mean, to whatever degree. So those are the things, I'm in the perception game. I want to measure the things that are likely, but I don't think service areas are an issue, no.
Well, I mean, is there some benefit to having a neighbor? As far as you're
I think so, maybe because of our later question, it gets into the distribution and equity.
Okay, fine. I just wanted to ask a question.
I think that service area really has a value only if it talks about the question of extending services by the approval of the voters. I think that is the key issue, that the government cannot impose services.
Yeah.
And we don't really say that.
Yeah, it says it, but service areas are created by approval of the voters in the area affected.
No, but the service area
only
provide
created.
Mr. Sheffield? Well, I'm just going to say the same thing. 13 doesn't read, I say, and to Jake, that service area is one of the big issues of the unification, but the way we wrote it is that the only way you're going to get anything is if you want to vote for your area, and 13 doesn't say that. What we said in here, I don't think.
The C part, I agree.
Service areas may be created only by the approval of the voters in the area affected, and you haven't got that only.
See, I think we're misleading the voter on this thing, or I ask the question. I would say either change it or strike it out completely. But I think it should be a question asked, but it should be asked the way we wrote it.
How about using the word only? Service areas are created only by approval of the voters in the area affected for the provision of public services.
For the provision of services, not public services.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's any objection to that?
Okay, that's fine.
I would suggest the use of maybe rather than are.
May only.
Service areas may
only be created.
Well, no, you're splitting your verb there. May be created only.
All right.
Only by approval.
Okay,
Okay, Mr. Brown has
Thank you.
thanks.
That's all together?
And it's may rather than are.
All right. Are we ready to proceed to page 4?
Yeah.
Mr. Shaw, question on page 4. Why do we need those 3 questions?
Sales tax, utility.
Yeah, what do they have to do with the charter? They're not in the charter.
Well, these, up until 17, you dealt with questions,
But you got to give us specific
which are in the chart.
Where?
Up until 17.
Yeah.
There's no sales tax without the vote of the public. That's right in the chart. So 17 and 18 are covered. Now from 19 on,
21, the assets and liabilities of previous government
Right.
spread area wide.
this is in your chart.
What's the significance of it? I mean, what do we
Well, isn't there a question between the assets and liabilities between the borough and the city? I mean,
Yeah.
isn't that a matter of competition? It doesn't have to do with both.
It's not going to be solved. It's not going to be solved immediately. Ms. Parker, no one said they're going to spread it area wide.
Mr. Chairman,
I'll strike the question. The charter wants.
related question pointed on the questionnaire. You interpret section 1607, assets and liabilities, one. But it says you government shall secure all assets, including property, claims, and franchise, and liabilities, including bonds and other obligations of the common government, provided that, blah, blah, blah.
That's what I was referring to.
Does that mean
should measure this then, and should we, yeah, what does it say?
It says they shall remain the obligation of the area which incurred the debt. It doesn't say they're going to be spread. How did you read that into that?
No, wait, but it says that the,
Which number is
Well, it's in
it?
the
The last thing in the charter, exactly, assets and liabilities, 1607. It says, shall remain the obligation of the area which incurred the debt. It doesn't say spread the debt area-wide.
then there is no issue between the assets and liabilities of the city and the borough. So we should strike the question.
Sewer, water, and streets obligations don't get spread, as I read it. Others do.
Okay, so that's what that says, that those three stay in the area, the service area, and everything else goes area-wide.
Should
The
that
new
be
government
tested?
has to handle everything else. The
Pardon?
new
It says
government
that-
has to handle everything else. It doesn't
What?
say.
It doesn't say what the new government is going to do.
The point of the question is that people may be voting against your charter because they think that you're spreading the assets or the liabilities and they're against that, okay? That's all I'm saying.
All right, this doesn't say that in there, so you've asked the wrong question.
So let's strike it.
Well,
But my question now is, should a question dealing with assets and liabilities in the transition state be asked? And if so, what should the question be?
It probably should.
Mr. Fisher has I think you are spreading the assets and liabilities. I think the question is very good. I think that, Dick, you think that's true of the sewers, water, and it's not. That's true of those I know, that they're certainly support. Yeah, you know, and that's the relevance of the way.
I would put in the exceptions in.
But if you want to, but the problem though, Dick, is that if you, seems to me like, if I remember my municipal politics well enough, if you leave it in this form, you imply that the city of Anchorage voter, for example, becomes part of the sewer obligations and vice versa in a very sensitive area when that isn't really what's provided for in section 1607.
Well, how would you amend what's here, if you would amend what's here, to reflect, would you make exceptions and say assets and liabilities of the previous government will be spread area-wide with the exception of 1, 2, 3, 4 services?
It doesn't say that.
Why we don't know it at all?
It doesn't say that.
Let's
It says it does.
handle both those questions. Do we want to get into it? And if so, yes, then how?
All right, let's see, we'll go around and then we'll address those questions. Sherry and then Lisa, I did it reverse.
Okay. This is an area in which I think we're not really spelling it out in the charter very clearly. So rather than testing the provision written in the charter with respect to this, I'd like to suggest that Mr. Rowan draw up a test of the concept divorced from the way we've said it in the charter. Do you think that assets and liabilities should be? And then when it's appropriate, I have a strong comment on number 17.
Lisa?
With the section that we have written in the charter, we have kind of left it up to the new government as to what to do with the
didn't say
assets and
that.
liabilities.
It's taken exactly from Title 29. That convoluted sentence, that's in the law.
So, but the way that the law and those explain is that means you're spreading,
Where did we speak of sales tax?
areas wide. And then what's the next question?
Tax. Oh, here it is.
Sure.
With the last, was there a problem with the spreading of the assets and liabilities area-wide?
Initially there was, I think, and probably in the end there was. It was raised as an issue. There are those of us that didn't think it was an issue, but that didn't make it any less an issue.
Mr. Besser,
And it really wasn't an issue. I mean, I'm still convinced of that, but sometimes it may think an issue is hard.
well, okay, I think the question let me test my own poll. Do you want the question addressed, the assets and liabilities?
No.
How many want it addressed? How many don't want it addressed? Okay.
It's according to the way it's done as to whether
Well,
I'm going to have it addressed.
Properly then.
And I have no objection.
To help sell it, I'd like to have the feedback from both.
Now, in addressing it, how many prefer that the question relate to what is in the document in a correct way, presumably, or how many prefer that we just ask, I shouldn't say just, we ask the voters what their choice would be as if we were doing this in the first round questionnaire without a document before. Okay, the first way is, in the light of the document as written, how many want to do it that way?
I think that that's the way that I'd like to see it end up in the
Well,
document.
raise your
rather
hand
than
if you
being
want
more
it.
specific. So
If you
I
want it done with
address
reference to
that
the
way.
text of the charter, raise your hand. If you want it done as an inquiry without regard to the charter, raise your hand.
If you don't care.
If you don't, okay, I don't know. Do you have any guidance from that?
3 to 2, that's hard.
Okay. Now, nothing to carry that 6 votes.
I think what we ought to do is not
Rewrite
go out until there's a rewrite.
We'll rewrite this one.
Will you rewrite?
What about, wait a minute, before you jump off, what about 19? What's that mean?
We start with 7.
Can we jump back to 17, and I'm missing page 17, but it says there will be no sales tax or other taxes levied. Now, the
didn't
or
say
other
that.
taxes levied is incorrect.
We didn't say that.
There will be no sales tax or no other new form of
We didn't say that. We didn't say that.
Mary.
We didn't say that.
Okay.
We didn't say that. The only thing we said was a sales tax. There will be no sales tax levied by the new government without a vote of the people.
We can strike out or other taxes.
You better.
What
because
section,
we
what
didn't
article,
say
just
that.
from my education, what article? 11?
Article 11, another one.
Mr. Chairman?
Right. Mr. Fisher?
You know, I don't want to get nasty about this, but if I've got to raise my hand and wait to be recognized by the chair, I think everybody ought. And I think that's the way we have to play the game.
I think your point is well taken.
Okay.
Sure. I hate to be officious in a small group, but
Right.
if you want me to be, I can.
Nicely.
Thank you.
Can I move on to explain question 19 and where it came from?
Is there a discussion of item 17?
What?
Discussion? Yeah, strike it, Mr. Chai.
Strike it.
Strike it entirely.
Right.
Yes. Mrs. Parker. Okay. The choice is, first of all, let's see if we want it all. We want the question 17 in some form retained or stricken. Those who want it retained indicate. Those who want it stricken indicate. You may be
I want to vote for
willing to retain or strike.
to retain it with that phrase.
Okay, now, what was the correction? To strike or other taxes?
It reads now, there will be no sales tax levied in the new government without a vote of the public.
Well, everybody knows that.
How do they know? How do they know that?
Well, that's kind of common sense, I would think, you know?
You have a lot of articles being...
Dumb question. Didn't even ask.
May I speak to that, Mr. Chairman? Yeah, he says it's a dumb question to ask, and I don't mind, getting told it's a dumb question to ask, but I happen to know that there is a group formed in the community, maybe you're aware of it, to put a sales tax on the referendum, and that there's going to be a campaign on this issue, and that it may in fact be tied to the charter. You people are subject to a number of other elections, including borough assembly, reapportionment, sales tax referendum, all other kinds of things. And I'm trying to raise questions. I'm delighted to get rid of questions that you think are meaningless, right? And I'm not here in an adverse position. I want everybody to know that. I'm here to try and bring your questions to the public so I can bring their reactions back to you. That's all.
Well, I think the consensus seems to be that we will keep the question, but we will change the phrase to make it more accurate. Now, I'm glad you sneezed. I thought the look on your face was very shame.
And I didn't want to cap it for that. I'm glad it was one.
Okay. Is there any other comment on page 4? Lisa,
Well, yes.
yes.
May I explain this question? Question 19 relates to question 44. This is a notion that I would like to raise, and for your consideration. Okay, this is a draft questionnaire. It is possible. I think it's clear in question 44. I had discussions with several commissioners on this question. Question 44 reads: in this home, you're in some way paying property taxes, directly or indirectly, through rent. And you're a consumer of many area-wide utility services which will be operated by the new municipality. If an increase in revenue were absolutely necessary and agreed, would you favor an increase in utility rates or an increase in the property tax rate to raise the same amount of needed revenue for the government? Why am I doing this? In this question, I think it's crucial that if the only revenue sources of a local government happen to be through a utility in which the taxpayer is a consumer, right, as opposed to a taxpayer on real property taxes, is there a difference in the way that is perceived, and do they get different kinds of support? And the notion behind this is this: that the distribution of income that has to do with the paying on utilities it tends towards a use factor that is based upon income distribution when you bill people to utilities. When you do it to the property tax, and we have a lot of evidence on people don't like the property tax, you have another kind of effect. And I'm just raising it as a possibility that this might be something to talk about. I'm talking about communications, not testing what you have in the charter. I'm talking about a way of saying that the charter anticipates an equity in the raising of revenue with regard to public service utilities, in the sense that all additional revenues go to the general fund for the purpose of the Assembly and the Mayor when those revenues in fact exist.
Fred?
How does that relate to the property owner who's on private utilities such as TruGas, private water company, private telephone company?
Well, is there anybody in that community who in the new community who would not be...
Birdwood would not be on telephone. People in the borough would not be on TruGas.
Mr. Chairman, all of Eagle River is on Valley,
Mr. Valley, MEA.
and they have either a private water system, but neither of the two major utilities here. And we don't really say anywhere in the charter, back to 19, that we are going to utilize the excess to go to the general fund. It's assumed, but it's not spoken to. I don't believe so.
No. And again, unless someone's real conversant with government and has good knowledge, they wouldn't know what you're talking about in that question. The general public would be confused by it.
They pay property taxes and utility bills. All I'm saying is, which one do they want to pay?
Well, if I'm on TruGas, I'd say, well, what are you asking me that stupid question for? How am I going to get a benefit out of TruGas?
I'm open to...
Ms. Parker?
Wouldn't it seem logical that most people were utility increase because utility increase would be cheaper than a property tax increase?
And the second question that I raise is, wouldn't that be an interesting thing to talk about in terms of this charter, if in fact it can be induced
You're
from?
gonna stop having group therapy. You're gonna stop. That's what you're doing, having group therapy of these questions. You're psychologically communicating, testing labs and all that. You guys are, you overdo this stuff, believe me.
Well, I don't know what you
More compliment, Mike. He's running a sociology lab here, that's what he's doing.
That's the group dynamic.
Not very well.
Well, I think 19 is great up until the time you say, you know, and for various appropriations by the mayor and the assembly. Now you're trying to advocate for the crooks, you know, and they're going to way of doing
I
it.
understand that.
Okay, right. And you mean and for various appropriations? Well, I thought that it makes it clear that it would be used for purposes other than
If these questions are this controversial with us, can you imagine how the recipient's gonna take these questions? If we can't agree on them and argue, you're asking the recipient something that's...
Well, I'm forced to respond that the complexity of a problem is not met by the simplicity of an approach. And if you think you're in a simple problem, then I just simply disagree. You are not in a simple problem. This is a very close election that's going to require a highly refined view of why people are doing what they're doing. And we're in the communications game here, where we're trying to find what little edge is going to make a difference in this election. Now, that's my interest in this thing. It's professional, and I don't care what you say about that. I'm not going to yield on that.
Let me point another thing out to you. When you're dealing with utilities, you're dealing with something that's regulated. You can't just arbitrarily go in there and use rates to offset property taxes and all that. These are regulated situations. It's not as easy as it appears.
Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, question 19, can we strike and for various appropriations by the mayor and the assembly?
Brad, do you want to speak to that, or?
I mean, when I read it up to that point, I read it and it sounded okay and it looked okay and I understood it. And then after that was added, I didn't understand what it meant and why it was there.
What's your feel about that?
Mr. Chairman, it's merely following up the process. Anything that goes into the general fund, of course, is available for appropriation by the mayor and the assembly. And I see it as merely clarifying the terminology of the general fund to the people who might be responding.
I think this proves that Shakespeare didn't write in a committee. I think that's what this proves.
It was Bacon. Bacon wrote it.
Bacon didn't write Shakespeare.
Bacon wrote it.
I don't mind leaving it in because I think that's procedure. The thing I'm wondering, when we talk about excess funds, when you go for a rate and fill out your rate structure, you don't talk about so much for excess funds. You may talk about in lieu of taxes or other things, might you not, Fred?
In a regulated situation, if you have excess funds, you have to reduce your rate.
Yeah,
That's
you
the
talk
first thing
about
the commission does.
something else, don't you?
Earnings. Earnings. You're talking about earnings, not excess funds, don't you?
Well, earnings in a private utility, I guess excess funds in a municipality, I suppose.
I don't know whether excess.
They're not on a profit and loss, as a private utility is. But either way, if you have an excess, you're supposed to reduce your rate. That's a regulatory body.
There's a regulated rate of return.
Right, that they're entitled. I still maintain your respectable words. Very confusing. Opens Pandora's box.
Can we move on? We can move on unless anyone has anything.
Well, we don't have any resolution on this question.
Well, we don't have a resolution. I don't know if there's a consensus. There's no consensus.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we leave it in as is and see what the response is that we get on it and decide for what it's worth, how we're going to use it when we find out.
Yes, please, in telephone calls that, come in odd times, utilities is one of the things, and in conversations too, that people want to know about. It's one of the things they want to know how we've addressed because they feel it's important to the charter. Now, they have all different kinds of feelings about it, worried about how the tax will be spread and all that sort of thing, and I don't know if this question answers it, but as one of the people involved in selling the charter, I would like to know what people are thinking about utilities. So I think somewhere in the questionnaire...
Why don't you ask the question that way? Really?
I wouldn't pretend to know how to ask.
Can you rewrite the question so that it addresses the issue more squarely?
If I could be told the issue that's in your mind.
I think, okay, an issue that would be in my mind, if I may, Mr. Chairman, the telephone department makes a profit. What's going to happen when the telephone incomes are going to be spread all the way up to Marywood and Eagle River? If the municipal light and power makes money, if it goes broke, who's going to pay for it? Who's going to add in the pot? Just simple, straightforward questions that I might ask if I'm going to vote for the charter or not. Now, you see, when I read this, I don't get that. But I think I know what you're trying to say. But as the guy that lives on Mountain View Drive or anywhere else, Sand Lake Road, I think you need to make it a little plainer.
Mr. Chairman.
Let's relate and communicate with the public. Huh? I'm just asking the question, should your telephone rate, your electrical rate go down with the charter? Should they be reduced with the new charter? That's all he's interested in, If I unify, will my telephone rate go down, will my electrical rate go down, or will it go up?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
No, I know you're not saying that, but I'm saying that's the way the question should be asked. Because the guy in the public doesn't know what to do.
Mr. Fisher. Mr. Fisher's
Chairman, I can't help thinking about the comment you made about the shifters. I think conceptually, I think by reading through this, the Commission must make certain that what is here is factual. The questions that are asked are factual. And I think that conceptually that we should certainly fair to ask Mike what he has in mind. And frankly, beyond that, I think we're nitpicking. And I really think I'd really prefer a sort of move on.
I welcome that, Mr. Fisher. I think, and I should have said something earlier, we engaged Mr. Rowan as a professional in how to do this and what would help us. And I'm not in a position as a layperson to make these judgments. I can tell him, you misread the intent of the charter, you don't understand what this paragraph means, and your question misleads people as to what we did. But I can't tell him that this question lacks importance or this question is not going to be helpful in communicating on the vote. That's not.
All I came to say with this question is that I think that if in the time that we have the results of this question and people go and vote, you may want to talk to people about the relationship of monies earned or excess funds coming off utilities. That's all. That's all I'm saying. You might want to take an intent resolution. You might want to have a press release. You might want to have a television spot. That's all I'm saying.
Bill?
Well, I agree with Dick, and Mike, I didn't mean to say it was a dumb question, because I just used the word dumb, what my friend will say. But anyway, I think the thing is that dumb is how they had a day or two to review this, and maybe it's, you are the professional, we are not. But I'm saying that I think that, Mr. Chairman, there's a certain amount of thought has to go into these things to get it come out right. And maybe we should all form a committee and go home and come back, but think about it.
What do you think about Lisa's proposal about striking out the last phrase?
is that what should happen is that in a sense the two should be combined, because what I think you're trying to say is, in saying assets and liabilities, of course you're referring to buildings and things like that, but one of the large questions, as I said, that comes to me is how the particular assets and liabilities, the utilities, will be affected. And if, in fact, we've said in the charter that utilities of the previous governments, along with other assets and liabilities, will be spread area-wide, then I think you have something worth having. I think they're less concerned about the funds after they come in. You know, we all kind of assume things about once the government's running, but they are concerned about how it will be distributed. Am I communicating?
I think the only suggestion I have on this is that these, from 19 to 22, we wouldn't talk about it for 20 minutes unless there was something here, okay? But we don't have the question. And I think, you know, I would just sit down with some of the commissioners who are available and interested in doing this with me if we actually went to the field with this and agree on questions.
I agree with question item 43. I want you to know that right now for you.
All right,
I think we should move on.
let's move on to page 5.
Can I establish one thing for the record?
Of course.
Right, as long as I'm paying for a professional, based on my expertise and experience, I'll always question a professional. I don't accept them blind, just for the record. Carry on.
I agree with 23.
That goes to lawyers, too.
You and I, John, can be agreed.
Okay, after 24, I've moved away from the actual literalness, let's say, of the charter.
Right
And I'm getting into the question of the charter election, which is a question we're dealing with.
Dick, now you're asking me.
Dick Fisher?
Yeah, could I ask a conceptual question about that, Mike? Have you addressed yourself about you may prejudice this question to the previous questions?
No, because this has been delivered. It's in their house. It's also with the interviewers. The interviewers hand it to them and say, this is the charter draft. You know, we're revising it. That's the introduction. Here are the basic things. Let me ask you how you feel about this. You know? And you say, I don't like that provision. You ask them why. Okay? So that conversation goes down. And we're talking about this provision here. And now we can test it. We can ask people exactly now. We've gone through some of the stated issues and the words that are in here. As they're phrased. We can ask them a series of questions about why they vote for or against it, and what the good reasons for voting for or against it are. Now we're starting to raise questions that aren't addressed in here, and which they assume this means. Okay?
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think the document itself does good things. And the first question that you asked indicates it does good things. And I think that it does prejudice the question. And I think as long as we realize that, it's fine.
Well, I mean, you know, they have it.
I mean, you'll see how that compares to the last one that wasn't, per se, prejudice. But let me just point out that, from my standpoint, I think we have to watch the results of this very carefully and don't abide by them. You know, I mean, let's ask the question again, straight away.
Which question is it?
The question whether you're for or against the charter.
We've never asked that question before. We only asked them if they were for or against unification and why. That's the only comparable question we could have. Look, we have 60.
Okay, all right.
It's really interesting what we have here. We have about 60% of the community who are for the idea of unification, okay, among voters. Now, in the borough, I would assume that with the addition of Eagle River, we're dealing with like 50% level, right at the edge of losing it in the borough. I would assume, just on the unification question. All right? Now, as you specify things in all of politics, you begin to give people reasons to vote against and not for. It's amazing. They're for the idea of unification, but on each issue, as you saw in the first one, we began to peel off some voters on single-member districts, some voters on executive mayors, some voters on utilities, some voters, okay? So the thing gets worse and worse, and we become more and more specific. Now we have a highly specific thing. We hand it to them, we get them on those issues and find out where they are, and we're saying who are they for or against. Okay? All we're looking at is to see if we're over the magic number.
Thank you.
Okay, Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, I'm on page 6, is that okay?
It's okay.
And I'm wondering, can you start question 33?
Question 33 relates to signing a petition to put the charter on the ballot in some referendum. What?
The guy's going to ask what's a civil referendum.
I think that should be
Pardon me?
knocked out.
Is that analogous?
Chairman, could I ask the reason for the question?
It had to do with the previous discussion on the fact that one option was to run an initiative petition where the charter would be circulated. And
That's just for one person. Can I ask you what the 37 does?
You think we'll knock it
we're
out?
assuming 33 is out.
Yeah.
37. Well, I was told, Sherry, you were the one talking about this comprehensive plan the other day. The GAAB 37. And there were a number of things that were running. 37 runs into 38, which has to do with the reapportionment question. And here I was trying to study okay?
Mr. Chairman, the thing that we said was that when you start talking about the charter and you get into the area of planning in the charter, there is some confusion to be found in the minds of people with the comprehensive plan and the charter. And that in the selling campaign of the charter, if the comprehensive plan is coming before the public at about the same time, we're going to have to be pretty careful to make sure that the provisions of the comprehensive plan are not confused with the provisions of the charter. Now, I think Michael's attempting to test here people's knowledge of the comprehensive plan and whether it's going to be voted on, and which it isn't. But, isn't this a question designed to test
Yeah.
whether they're confusing it with the charter?
Yeah, because they're putting out that information while you're putting out your charter, and they're dealing in some way with the same matter.
Okay, I have a question about number 36.
Yeah.
I don't like the question because the official or quasi-official position of the Charter Commission has been, and I think it would be the case in the lawsuit, as a matter of fact, that Eagle River's efforts to form a government really have nothing to do with unification. That the local boundary commission may approve that petition with unification or without unification. And so if you're going to ask that question, it ought to be in the phrase more likely, less likely, have no effect, don't know, rather than just these two alternatives. Because our view is that they shouldn't be concerned about us in unification, because if they're going to go out, they're going to go out whether there's unification or not.
What would you add, Joe? I'm sorry.
That you have no effect.
In fact, I'd almost like, I almost wish we could believe them. I don't know why, but to say that
Or do you think
the
it'll have
Charter
an effect?
Commission, maintains or believes that the unification effort has no effect in the long run on, But at least to say, if you're going to just ask a straight question,
Or I think we're going to add, or
likely
will it have
less
no
likely.
effect?
yeah, or have no effect.
Or do you think it'll have no effect whatsoever? In either case. Let's add it. I mean, this is an edification question, which is really for publication more than anything else, right? I mean, you can hear this being heard and answered in Eagle River, right? And you can hear it being heard and answered in the city and in the borough. And it's really worth comparing.
See, Fred, I do question professionals sometimes, but I always accept their answer when they ask.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we're keeping the wording of 36 the same and adding a choice that's no effect. Is that?
No, I was adding the wording too, sure.
I missed the wording.
Should be stopped with defeated, or do you think it'll have no effect?
Okay.
Right?
Or do you think the charter would have an effect? We're not through with 37 yet. Excuse me. If you want to continue on, maybe I can buy the first sentence up to Anchorage area question mark. And then you're trying to test his intelligence, the level of his intelligence some more by, can you tell me if that plan will be coming before the people of Anchorage for approval? I don't understand what that's for.
Ms. Holmes will address that.
Mr. Chairman, I know what we're trying to test, and I think I'm with Bill that maybe we're not testing what we really want to test.
Okay.
Maybe if we leave the first part of it, and then instead of asking whether it's coming for a vote, ask whether that plan will be affected by the charter. If so, how?
That's what I'm measuring. Because anybody who says yes is telling me they don't have that information from the Greater Anchorage Borough. They have that information only from an assumption based upon people talking about the kinds of things you're talking about. And they've mixed you up with them when they tell you it's coming to a vote. This is not a reapportionment question that comes next.
Lisa?
Maybe we should just ask if they feel there's a direct relationship between this comprehensive plan that's being developed and the charter. If they feel that they're interrelated.
Then we have to ask them what the relationship is in order to find out.
Sure.
I guess what I'm getting to is I'm afraid of the comprehensive plan and its effect on our work with the charter. Should the assembly be involved in an enormous hassle over the comprehensive plan right about the time, and the timing is such that that might be, depending upon when we go and when the assembly does things. And
How familiar is the general public with the comprehensive plan?
I don't know.
It's in the most working.
Probably more so with the charter. Off the top of my head, I'd say more so than with the charter because
I'll make it a
it's
little
generated
better.
more publicity
I
and
can stop 20 people
more
on the
public
street.
meetings.
I can stop 20 people on the street and they will know what the comprehensive plan is.
Well, I bet you can stop the same 20 if they won't know what.
So you're asking when it's going to come before the
I agree
and all that. It's ridiculous. We're assuming because we know it that the general public knows this stuff, and they don't.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to see this question deleted. I think we could handle it by, in our presentation of speaking to the fact that ordinances will be carried forward in the new government, which is, and you can respond very easily to those questions, that we will carry it forward. And I have heard Jane mention it, but I frankly am in planning. It's not a burning question as far as I'm concerned. Maybe I'm wrong.
But the people who relate the two, they don't know that much about the comprehensive plan. They don't know that much about the charter. They know that the two exist, but they relate the two together.
Well, but I think that can be handled without a question by explaining that ordinances will go forward.
You see, this question doesn't do what you're saying.
Sure. Remember that you know.
Mr. Chairman, just to give our list a tiny bit of background on this, in the subcommittee, we went round and round and round on, and maybe because I insisted we go round and round, on questions 42 and 43. I really felt that testing mass transportation as it relates to the charter was not something we should be getting into at all, that it wasn't germane, and that it was going to confuse us with the comprehensive plan and all the rest of that is an error. And so in that respect, we got into this philosophical discussion about confusion between the charter and the comp plan. I think when we decide what we're going to do with question 37, we ought to simultaneously look to questions 42 and 43, which refer to, especially 43, the comprehensive plan, and make a decision on the package rather than...
Well, I agree with Paul. Yes, sir. Well, I'll waive the rule, Bill, go ahead.
I agree with that
42 doesn't have anything to do with the charter. 43, as I recall, doesn't have anything to do with the charter, with what we've written in here. And 37 doesn't have anything to do with the charter. Correct. And I think that anything that doesn't have anything to do with the charter, we shouldn't have in this.
Can I respond to that?
Yes,
That's from a senior thing.
Okay, let me...
Yes, right.
Let me just quote the people of the area on the question, all right? Because there is some interesting data on this. You say it doesn't have anything to do with the charter. Yes.
I never got this back. Let me get off my book. I got one magic.
Take a look at the problems. Now, forgetting the unification question for a moment, what would you say are 2 or 3 most important problems facing the people of this area of Alaska? Mass transportation, 6%, road maintenance, 21%, parks, 3%, inefficient planning, 80%, and rapid growth, 13%, and an influx of people, which also reflects in some way to mass transportation, is 27%. About 2/3 of the people.
So your point is that it's perceived, the charter is perceived as related to these issues.
Well,
No.
we know, we said, you feel that the resolution of the problems you mentioned, either one way or another, will be affected by unified governance. And we had 37% who said yes. We had 36% who said no. I would submit this is not a 37% question when I deal with that kind of a margin. I think we've got to raise questions and see. And the reason I put this mass transportation thing in here was to raise this question with you. Should you, in your communications about the charter, deal with matters which are implicit, so that you're selling the charter, even though I agree with you totally, it's not literally. Mass transportation isn't in here, okay? When we talk about the comprehensive plan, when you pass a resolution of intent, right, in the commission, and when you begin explaining to people what this charter is, should you be taking a position on whether one government can deliver mass transportation services better than two?
Well, 42 is incorrect in that, really, I think it implies an incorrect thing in that right now we have one government that is handling mass transportation. We do not have two governments. If we were talking about two library systems or two public works departments or so on, but it's not true with mass transportation.
43 is really the question.
Well, then I think 42 should be deleted.
Okay.
All right. Sherry?
Mr. Chairman, this brings me to 43, which I think is testing something that this commission, if it is consistent with what we've done so far in the charter, has absolutely no intention of doing, even if we got an overwhelming statement from the people saying, yes, we should have a whole section that requires mass transportation planning. Maybe I'm misreading the commission, but this isn't going to give me any information that's going to lead me to modify the charter.
Okay, that's never the intention of any of this, is to modify the charter.
Yeah,
Quite
okay,
frankly,
well,
I'm talking here about communications. We could change this around any way at all, but
What do you mean, Mike, that you're talking about communication to the people who take this test?
no, I'm assuming that there's in between the time that you finish with this survey and get this kind of input, or without it, that you have an obligation and an interest in communicating to the people of Anchorage what you have written. Okay, I assume that you're going to go beyond sending them this paper, okay, of our talk. Now, what does the charter say? That's one thing. What does it mean? That's up to you. So I'm trying to find out in this research what it means, okay, to them, and what they think it should mean. And if you all agree that it means that, then my proposal to you would be to let's start talking about mass transportation. That's a way to sell it.
Lisa? I'm sorry. Well, go ahead. Lisa and then Fred.
Along the same lines, the Department of Highways at this time is doing a survey on the roads and mass transit and such. And in tonight's paper, there was an article on public transit, and the Department of Highways and Commissioner of Highways has stated that the state is going to be working with mass transit and public transit, and they're going to be putting more emphasis on this than, developing all these big early freeways.
They're only doing 7 this year.
Yeah, and they are trying to get executive funding, mass transit, public transit funds, and that, questions like this maybe should be taken to the Commissioner of Highways.
Mr. Chairman? Fred?
Health official will have that fellow removed. I read that paper enough.
Which one?
The Commissioner of Highways. The other thing, Mr. Rowan continually uses the word assume. I noticed in this whole presentation he keeps saying assume communication.
I love each other.
But I would like to stop a moment and reflect on the word assume. If you break it down, it makes an ass out of you and me. Just want to get that for the record. If you break that word down and keep using it.
We have it on the record. Let's say
I'm continuously enlightened by these meetings.
What's your pleasure on these questions?
Right.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Very much opposed, Mr. Chairman.
When we say them, would someone tell me?
Serious questions.
All right, let's revert to question 37. Assume that the question is on striking number 37. Can I get an indication of how many would prefer to retain? First, how many would prefer to retain question 37? How many would prefer to? Thank you. How many would prefer to strike question 37?
What do we do with 37?
The majority said strike.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to agree with it.
Oh,
You did. I don't know what the question
Would you like to call?
If anyone thinks I'm misreading this consensus, then state so, because I may be. All right, going on to question 42.
How about 38?
38.
Did we already read that? Is that?
We'll go back.
Oh, excuse me.
We're just taking these through.
Yeah,
These three came together when Sherry and I were talking about it.
42. There was an objection that it was an incorrect statement of the situation. There was discussion of the importance of it. How many would prefer to see question 42 retained? How many prefer to see 42 removed? That's all. 42, the majority favored removal. Question 43. How many would prefer to retain 43? Retain 43. How many would prefer to delete 43? The majority favors deleting 43. Does anyone wish to suggest anything as an inquiry with respect to mass transportation or the comprehensive plan that is not on Mr. Norman's document? I see no one.
Well, Mr. Chairman, yes. Frankly, I disagree that 42 is incorrect. I mean, I think it is correct. Can get one government handle it better than two.
Well, the implication, first of all, I think we've acted on that.
I know we have,
But
but what I'm trying to do is get one back in there that has to do with mass transportation.
Oh, okay. Well, that's my the purpose of my.
Some question of mass transportation. I'd just like to have one in there. I think it's important.
Please.
The question possibly is to whether people feel the charter will solve these problems of, mass transit in the park and stuff like that. Something like that, question like that.
Can we do that, Mr. Chairman? Just leave it up to Mr. Rowan to write it?
Well, we've done it already.
Mr. Rowan, would that,
Look, I mean, this is your game, not mine. Let me,
don't insult Mr. Rowan?
no, yeah, I'm telling you the intention of the question. I don't know if you're speaking to it or not. I don't know if the commission is speaking to it. The intention of the question is this. when we ask people what their problems are, they say, in a large majority, mass transportation or things related to it. All right? That's the first fact. It's a political fact of life. 37% of the people feel that the problems that they mentioned, okay, are related to this charter. All right? So I'm just saying that mass transportation is an issue in the charter. Now, I think we're all agreed on that. Now, the question is, should you say anything? Do you want to know anything from the public about what it is they perceive that's in the charter of mass transportation, or what you're going to do, whether you're committed to it or not, whether the new government is involved in it, and so on? Lisa?
The charter isn't supposed to speak directly to these things, are they? I thought this was something for the government. Once you get in the framework of which operate, they care about these things.
As I understand it, what Mike is saying is that the document is one reality, and the way people perceive it is another reality. And if we were to learn that people feel that unification will make a more efficient delivery system in mass transit, then in the selling of the charter, that would be something we would talk about. And we would know mass transit was a major concern if we had a question that was designed to get that, and I don't know if these were. And we would act accordingly. And the question along that line is useful. Is that a fair statement, Mr. Long? All right. If, on the other hand, we learned that people thought that the existing borough was doing a super job with mass transit and unification might mess it up, we would want to know that anxiety exists so we could deal with that. Really.
Mr. Chairman, in the question that we asked in the last survey about what are the 2 or 3 most important problems facing the people in the area, mass transit did get 6.1%, but it was way down on the list. Above it were things like road maintenance, crime and law, rapid growth, influx of people, pipeline impact, housing, general planning, a whole raft of things that scored, many percentage points, up in the 12 to 20 percentage points as opposed to 6. I see a bias here in just touching on mass transportation, because mass transportation was not identified in this survey as one of even the top 5 or 6 most important things. So if we do handle these concerns, I think we ought to address the broader concerns of housing, traffic.
But I think when you talk about traffic, sure, we're talking about the same thing.
We're not talking about mass transportation says buses and other ways of moving groups of people. But traffic talks about the common automobile, and we had traffic, and that was 9.1.
We have suggested to Mr. Rowan that questions 42 and 43 on page 7 be deleted. And the issue under discussion is whether any inquiry should be made about mass transportation, or whether anyone on the commission has another form of question to suggest. So good.
I believe it's a non-issue as far as the charter is concerned.
Could I ask Sherry to pursue what she's going at? Because she was suggesting something I think is very rational, which is that the perceived problem that people have given us should that we ought to test in some way what these people assume. Thanks very much. What the charter means towards those issues, as opposed to what it says.
Let's. Mr. Fisher has a point of view, and another commissioner has a different point of view. Let's see whether it's worth pursuing this. How many members of the group would like to see a substitute question framed on the issue of mass transportation in some form?
Well, Mr. Just makes transportation.
Well, I think a series of questions on the issue brought in this last one would be very appropriate.
You mean mass transportation, roads,
Right.
traffic? Roads. All right, you want the question put in that form?
Yes.
How many would like that subject matter pursued in a series of questions?
Given the right question,
Well,
of course.
I want to find out if it's worthwhile for us to...
Drafting a question,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
I don't think it hurts, but I don't think it's an issue. We want
And how many would oppose an effort to frame those questions?
Stuff over down.
Mr. Chairman, the very real problem I'm having with answering this yes or no is, first of all, I don't have that question before me, and I have a little bit of a problem. A charter can only do certain things. And by knowing these things, I need to have some feeling that I may be able to offer something positive toward helping that particular thing. If we are getting into the whole problem of efficiency of delivery of service, that kind of a thing that we, for instance, speak to in our preamble, then I could understand it. But if we are talking about saying that we'll have one mass transit system when we already have one mass transit system, that we'll have better roads because we just have one and not two public works departments. I guess I need to see those questions and see how we might possibly speak.
Well, my problem is that we can be here all night, and I don't know whether if the group decided it wasn't worthwhile to draft that. I don't know how to do this any different way than we're doing it. Lisa, did you want to?
What couldn't we just ask an open-ended question on what people feel the charter will do? What?
When do you need to know all this, Mr. Rowan, as to when are you going to feel?
Well, I mean, the rational thing to do in terms of your normal schedule, whatever that is, is to go into the field. If you feel you have a vote in August, to go into the field now so that you can use this to communicate. And I think one of the problems I think that's existing here between us today is that you think that there's some who think that what I'm trying to do is rewrite the charter. I have no interest in that. What I'm trying to do here is find out what perceptions of the charter are in existence and what people are connecting to it, so that when you go to tell people what this charter means, that you'll know what issues to confront in a direct communication with voters.
I promise I'll say one more thing and then I'll be quiet. I understand fully what it is you're driving at, and my problem with it, I guess, is that if we put a question like this in a survey, the kind of answers we're going to get back will not be answers that can be solved by rewriting the charter. So, the only thing we can do is use it for a political campaign. Okay, now suppose that question and the answers to it happen to be printed in the media. We will raise the level of expectation just by the framing of the question in the general population to expect that somehow the charter should have done something about these things, or maybe could have, else why would we have asked the question in the first place? And then all we're doing is setting ourselves up to say, well, gee, it's not appropriate for us to solve the housing crunch in the charter.
Well,
I tend to agree with Sherry's reasoning on this. I really do. If you want to ask a question as to whether they feel that the charter has addressed all the issues that it really should, and leave it an open question, I think maybe you may get some answers that might need this direction. But I tend to agree with their reasoning.
Yeah, I think it just tends to complicate the issue. try to be too much to everything. I think that you can't spread yourself out.
Mr. Chairman. I'm going to have to insist as members of the body that from now on we have a motion. The motion be moved up and down, and move on and proceed that way, because frankly, if we don't, we're not going to proceed. So that's by the rules.
Well, the reason we haven't done that is because this is the first time anyone has seen this material. The sense has been not to instruct Mr. Rowan, but to give him guidance, and so a motion is not well oriented towards that kind of a process. I agree with you that we're belaboring this, but we're almost at the end, and I think.
Mr. Chairman, if what you said is true, then I would go along with that. But what you say is not true, because I think we just struck two questions that I think Mr. Rowe feels very strongly about getting in there. And I think he feels obligated now to strike it, because that was the vote of the commission. And frankly, I really think
Agree.
I think we've done it unparliamentally. And I think that's not wrong.
Ms. Parker?
What said that the reason for these two questions was to get an idea as to how people perceive each other. So why can't we just ask the open-ended questions about how do they perceive? What do you think it's going to do?
Well, going to Mr. Fisher's point, there was a strong sentiment in the commission to strike those questions, but on the other hand, as we go through these, we often discuss them in a different context where I don't think a motion would be appropriate. And I don't know when someone raises his hand what the next thing I'm going to hear is. I know that I'm often surprised when I hear. In any event, I think we'll have to leave it this way, Mr. Rowan, that perhaps some mass transportation questions or other issues will be suggested for a feedback process. But I really can't.
Listen, I've been heard on it, and you've made. I feel that a decision to make. So I will move on.
All right, let's move on to question 44. I think Mr. Fisher's point that we should examine.
I think 44 was covered really by the earlier question, and my inclination would be to strike it.
What was your question? I must not have thinking.
Earlier.
Having to do with
What number?
Like from 19 to 22, a series of questions we spent 20, 30 minutes on, and we're going to rewrite those.
we really have, I think, only one more page of this.
Okay.
The rest of it is...
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
may I ask one question on 41? Is that a little confusing? The Charter Transition Commission, the school board will be elected in total right away. I wonder if that say it?
The word right away.
Shall be elected in total right away. It seems awfully awkward. What we mean is that the first election we'll elect total new school board, but I don't, perhaps just looking at the wording, or maybe I'm...
Okay.
You're right. It should be reread.
Let's move on to page 8.
45 is the question on the preambles, which traditionally most referenda get decided by the preambles because it's all people read. And so I wrote two preambles here. One, or I told them that here are two statements which outline the purpose of the charter. Which one of these statements is close to your ideas and hopes about what a local government should have as the purpose? First one is as you've written it. Second one uses words that come directly out of the research. They resonate with the reasons people gave me for unification. To eliminate duplication. Duplication, remember, was their word. And waste in local government. That also uses a negative, anti-aspect towards existing governments, which is one of the reasons why people want to unify. Increasing effectiveness in government. Secure maximum, I use the word neighborhood instead of local because I was reflecting there the community council.
I think it's very well worded. I don't see.
So I thought, it'd be interesting to take...
You might write our preamble.
We're happy to kind of.
Well, as a matter of fact, we would have this back by the time you finish your final draft. So if you really like it, you have to move on it now. But there, once again, this is something that I just wanted to, that I see as a communications tool.
Mr. Chairman, did I understand you, Mike, that we would not have this information back so that we would have any opportunity to revise the cover?
If we went into the field now, we would probably have a hand count, like we did on some of the other questions, on some of the earlier questions before we data process. In 12 or 15 days. So, as soon as the interviewing is over, you can do that hand count. So yes, you could have it before you made a decision. But in terms of data processing and analyzing, there's another 2 or 3 weeks there.
So you're really talking then in terms of a media, really a purge as opposed to
Absolutely.
anything at all for input. Okay.
Yeah, I'm finished with that. That's why in the beginning I suggested that the idea of a third survey is becoming obsolete. Yeah, so I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in doing a communications.
Mr. Sheffield, I really like 45-2. It really says what I think what we're trying to do. And I would go along with what Mr. Fisher, I would make a motion that we adopt 45-2. Is that possible?
Madam President, Mr. President, excuse me, I have it. I think that you'd have said practically the same thing if we used, instead of local control, if we had said neighborhood control in our first one up there.
All right, Mr. Fisher, could I suggest that the motion is good out of order? We're talking about adopting something. I think, Mr. Sheffield, that the understanding that we had was that revisions of the charter would be made after the second round. And I'm loath to entertain the motion in the absence of members who had that understanding and who were not here. So I'll rule it out of order on that basis.
Mr. Sean, since we're all in agreement, let's not nitpick it and move on.
Is there anything on, I think we would move to 48.
In 48, I was testing a one-sentence way of describing what this charter is, the way I read it.
Are there any comments on 48?
I think it's pretty well worded.
Good. That's one of the next ones.
I would just wonder if we said, and at the same time, to indicate that they're within the same government rather than choice.
I don't think that was right. And at the
Oh, and at the
same
same time.
And at the
That's
same
very
time,
good. That's an improvement.
I like that.
And I wonder what you're looking for in, what you're looking for in 49. Are we saying an in,
It's not
going
necessary.
to, are you going to vote on it?
It's not necessary.
Are there any comments on 49 or 50?
Admit it.
You can omit 49, it's not necessary. We've got it really.
Yeah. Let's go to page 9.
50, of course, related to that earlier point I was making you, and maybe we should strike it. What?
Yeah, I think that way stated, I like it.
And at least it's something we can talk about. You know, if people are...
That tells us what statistics we should be getting.
and this is based on a conversation I had with you, Sherry, on the number 51, the number of assemblymen. I saw that, out of that discussion we had, was kind of like an increase of the assembly versus the community council thing as a form of control, because we knew the responsiveness and control was an issue. I don't know if this is a necessary question. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, what, 51? I'm going to ask a good question. Like, have you ever asked the question, which is what the viewpoint of the public is for paying local government officials? Paying them a reasonable wage. That'd be a really interesting question. If we wouldn't follow the survey up, I would really like to have an indication of the public's attitude to it.
First gentleman to turn in the questionnaire today, the feedback thing, as well as his comments on the entire charter, remarked to me that government officials should be, and particularly assemblymen, should have their salaries directly tied to the way they address the situation.
Mr. Chairman, if there is any, Mike, is it feasible to this?
Very simple.
Is it all right with the commission? What does that have to do with the charter?
I think it would have something to do with whether you put in the translation what the salaries would be.
Yeah, we could set the tone in the charter.
Because you see, that's the only place that you're going to address what these new officials are going to be paid. Otherwise, they'll be setting their own salaries, which is usually considered illegal.
Mr. Chairman, the statement has just been made to us that we would not have that information back in that time to be in the charter. So, other than just the general information, it was not.
I thought he said he could give us a hand count.
Well, I can give you a hand count on that question if you want.
The point of it is, though, we have not yet decided when we're going to do this and when it's going to be before the elections. And we're not going to this until, I thought, until after.
There's a division of opinion here. How many would like to see a question concerning remuneration of local officials?
I would.
How many would for? How many would not like to see a question? What?
Would not.
Would not. Let me see. I think the majority, including the chair, gets the question should be asked.
Well, that's right.
But is there any other?
The rest of the questions are exactly the same as the demographics collected in the first.
Are those income figures still the right breakdown given inflation at 57?
Well, there's a bit of a problem, but we did collect them that way the last time, and I think it's useful for comparison purposes, so I would up to that.
Okay, anything else on this document from Mr. Braun? I apologize to you if this has not been handled expeditiously, but I just don't really know how to do it once you
Are
put
we
your
going
foot
to
in
get
the
together again on it in any manner? Are we going to get together on it again in any manner before it flies with this?
Throw it out. I mean, no, I don't have to be like this.
The secretary asked whether we need a motion as to whether or not to take the survey. I think it's covered by contract.
But no, it's by contract. It's normal. Guidance, that's all we gave.
Ms. Parker, do you just need to ask?
It does fall to
That's the question I had on the
it's
first one.
split between Inlet View and Spinard.
No.
Let me get together with Irene and figure that out. Okay?
Let's move on. Let's move on with our agenda.
Thank you. The only other thing I need is there are a series of questions that have been proposed that are not written here. and which are prefer not to bring back the whole commission unless that's the way you.
We have a committee, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, what's the subject matter?
The subject matter I dealt with page all the utility questions.
Oh, you mean the thing we discussed tonight, but
The rewriting.
Oh, I think that the subcommittee should, unless I hear to the contrary, I think you can assume that,
Committee can handle it.
yes.
You use the word again.
I know, I figured.
What that word assume?
Let's move on now. We have the next item under 5B is the discussion of compensation for commission. Ms. Parker?
I don't know what I need to put down tonight. But it's something to bring up for discussion. I mean, the reason to bring it up for discussion is that I don't work and I'm not wealthy. I've been really off my savings these days, really gone. I can go and I can get a job and make money, you know. I don't really need the job that I should do, so, yeah.
So what? What do you think?
We should ask somebody for some sort of procedure.
Mrs. Holmes?
Yeah, it has been a topic of discussion among some of the commission members over the course of, say the last 6 weeks. And it first came up for discussion just about the time the Eagle River suit blew up in our faces. And a group of us were on the point of bringing it back to the commission for another discussion. At that point, we sort of thought, we're making a lot of waves right at this point in the paper, and so let's hold off a bit. Several of us are spending a lot of gratis hours, and that doesn't bother me to the extent that it doesn't cost me anything to do it, but it costs me a lot of babysitting money. And so I think in light of the costs that a lot of us are incurring, and in light of the fact that most commissions do receive a minimal compensation, I would move that we recommend to the Assembly that it compensate us minimally for regular meetings of the commission.
Motion is made and seconded to request the Assembly provide compensation minimally to the commission. Discussion is in order on this motion. Mr. Shaw.
Did we not agree in the beginning that we were going to take this without salary, and now we're getting into this salary? I mean, I don't quite understand what we're doing here.
Further
We
discussion?
all went into this with elected officials.
Mr. Fisher, and then you, Mr. Fisher.
Boy, am I in a difficult position. You know, I think we ought to be paid. I really do. I felt that way since the very first meeting. I wanted it to be paid. But now that we have agreed not to be, we've sold that bill of goods to the Assembly when we asked them to approve our budget, and we sold that bill of goods to the public. Hey, I don't think we can turn around. And it grieves me to say that.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it grieves me to say that I think that any time that the situation that we decide we probably made a mistake, that it isn't time to look at it. And I think we probably made a mistake in not having any compensation for any kind of meeting. To suggest to the Assembly that they compensated in relation to what they would have compensated another board, I don't think would grieve the Assembly very much. I think that the number of hours that many folks have put in relation to this charter so far has far exceeded the number that some of us anticipated putting in. I wouldn't feel bad at all to come to the conclusion of asking the Assembly to consider this like any other commission or board and compensating it accordingly.
Is there a standard?
We're presently compensating the boards that have semi-judicial capacity $35 for a regular meeting, and I think it's $25 for special meetings.
They increased now that I'm going on.
Mr. Fisher, let me make it clear that
And that's at the, that I believe is going to take place the first week
Mr. Fisher,
of July or whenever the new year begins.
Dick, go ahead. Let me make it clear that I don't give a damn what you send me things. I'm concerned about the public. No, I'm concerned about what the folks are think, you know, we turn on. It's a really minimal thing, and anyway, it's really, it's part of it.
Different people that what you do, and they say about what you do, and you tell them about what you do, and they say, well, you get paid, and you say, no. You know, you don't get paid, and they say, well, that's not terrible, you should, you know, everybody else gets paid. But, one of my reasons for wanting compensation is that food costs money, and I have no money, and I like to eat. In order to work, I have to eat.
Mr.
This is very good for
No, just one thing. In the public's mind, I think there has been some advantage to say, no, we aren't, but we're, quote, being very altruistic about this. They may consider us fools, but kind of noble fools. I suppose I'm somewhat sensitive in that the Capital Sites Commission thought we're going to be working very hard on this, and we have leeway, so we voted ourselves in that case a salary which was commensurate with what the election commission is getting. And I realize Bill served for nothing. We went through the somewhat humiliating exercise of unvoting ourselves a salary simply because we have been subjected to a great deal of comment in the public, and in effect we're jeopardizing what the Federal Land Use Planning Commission members were getting, and also the election board, our election commission, and we certainly did not wish to do that. So the fact we've taken action to have none, and then all of a sudden come, hey, this is a bigger job than we thought, to ask for more, I think there might be some negative comment. Yet I feel strongly about Sherry.
I have no objections to calling it an expense account and letting the expense accounts be put in if you wanted to, which is an alternative way of handling the situation.
Mr. Shepard.
Well, I think, we probably made a mistake at the outset by not putting some sort of a salary. And I can well see Sherry's problem with paying for babysitter. She's done a lot of work. She's in a million special meetings. I guess with babysitter and TV dinners and stuff to buy all the time for this sort of thing. I can't buy what Lisa said, and I appreciate the problem, because you could get a job and you could serve just like the rest of us try to serve. You see it? And so I think Anchorage Times would take that argument and just rattle it around Anchorage, and we'd lose the whole thing. So I have to look at public opinion a little bit on that basis. Kind of like Dick, I'm afraid to do it.
What about calling it an expense account and using it directly as an expense account?
Okay. Does anyone else want to speak to this?
Can we go retroactive? If you're gonna put your neck in a noose, why don't we go home?
This is,
Mr. Chairman, the difference I see in the situation is that we met a lot of hours on the first draft, and we're now at what I consider to be the midpoint of the process. And if it ever is an appropriate time to reconsider a decision made, it's right now when we've finished what I consider to be the first half. To a great extent, those of us who don't hold full-time jobs pick up some of the daytime work for the commissioners who are unavailable during those hours. And to that extent, it's not entirely fair to say that Lisa could go out and get a job. She could, but she would then not serve the commission. And the work, since we've set this miserable timetable to meet, the work, if Lisa, I could go out and get a job too during the day, but the work that Lisa and I would do. I don't know how you test the public sentiment on something like this. I don't envision it as spread on the front page of the paper if we have an assembly that is sympathetic.
Mr. Franklin?
Mr. Chairman, who to write the charter, as I understand, put as much into it as I could. I dropped out of school, I have 3 of my 4 classes. And I mean, I put a lot of money into that, a lot of time before commission and stuff like that. Sure, I could get a job. Yeah, it depends on the kind of job you want to do on writing the charter. How much you want to put into it.
Mr. Chairman,
Did you run for public office expecting to get paid?
No.
You ran for public office to do a service to the community. That's why the public's going to look at it. I mean, all this stuff that you bring on as a personal issue is all on good, but that's not going to buy any sympathy.
Mr. Chairman,
Well,
let me ask a question in relation to an expense account, a monthly expense account of a fairly low minimum.
well, I would say that.
Perhaps go in that direction.
Okay, I would say that it would be in order, in the event that the pending motion isn't adopted, to consider that as an alternative for people who have expenses between meetings of the commission. My view, it's a very difficult question. When I voted with others of you not to ask for compensation, I underestimated the amount of time that would be involved. All of us have certain hardships in this situation. I recall one trip I made from Juneau to Anchorage and turned around that night to go to Seattle, and it was a very expensive meeting for me to attend. And as a matter of fact, if I were not here this evening, I would be charging a client on an hourly basis, and in that sense, this is another very expensive evening for me to attend. But I don't think that's really, I think that issue, the point is we did say to the public, to Mrs. Whitson and others, we were very smug about the fact that we were going to serve without compensation. I think there is a problem in going back now and saying we've changed our minds. In fact, if it weren't highly publicized, it might make them feel that we really had duped them, that we had first advertised that we were not being paid, and now, halfway in the process, when they sort of dropped out monitoring our meetings, we turned around and asked for money. It seems to me, and I think it would be really inappropriate in that light, personally, to seek compensation for our attendance at meetings. Now, a different case is presented if we have subcommittees and we ask people during the day, such as Sherry Holmes, to do something in which she has an out-of-pocket cost because she, in order to fulfill that, has to get a babysitter, or if there's a transportation expense or a luncheon meeting or something of that sort. And I think it would, as Mrs. Fleming suggested, we probably could deal with that for those who serve us on an interim basis and do extraordinary things for us. But I see how personally I could vote to compensate myself for attending a regular meeting. That's my opinion. Sharon?
Mr. Chairman, I've been persuaded by the discussion that it is not a politically expedient thing to ask that we ourselves be compensated. I think favor what you suggested, and I would not personally intend to milk the Treasury for more than occasional expenses if this were the wish of the Commission to go this way. Or I would wonder about the ability of the Assembly to suggest that we be compensated at this point for something to initiate from the Assembly rather than from us.
I think asking for any kind of compensation is going to spell a problem. I think we want to drop both of them, expenses or otherwise.
But what I was speaking of was that I don't know whether the question of reimbursing someone for expense, whether we have to go to the Assembly for that. I would think that it'd be handled as a voucher, like anything else. I don't. To the extent that, of course, there's money available in our budget.
Or wise.
Mr. Fisher?
Sure, I tend to be opposed to that too. For one, I've been very much opposed to eating during the days. I wanted to eat the evenings rather than the days. I realized we have a workload. Frankly, I think our workload should be programmed a little bit better. And I don't mind if we work something out, but frankly, I don't want
laying this item on the table, and then to consider the possibility of coming back with a more specific recommendation possibly of how we might handle expenses, and then have something to really to bring to the commission. I think now unless we wish to just talk in philosophy and say that the door is closed.
There's one other element I'd like to raise, and that is that we're defendants in a lawsuit which is asking that we be spending money, public money, on this operation. And I think it's a very poor time for that.
Yes.
I mean, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move that this item be laid on the table.
Is there a second to the motion to lay the question on the table? There is no second to the motion to lay on the table. The question is, shall the motion to request the Assembly to provide for minimal compensation of the Charter Commission be adopted? Secretary will call the roll.
Okay, Chai,
Opposed?
Fisher,
No.
Rose,
No.
Holmes,
No.
Josephson,
No.
Parker, Sheffield,
No.
Sturgeon, no. No.
Mr. Chairman,
Eight in opposition, none in favor. The motion fails. Mr. Sheffield?
When you mentioned the witches, I think the Charter Commission wore them out.
Our endurance is better than Mr. Crony?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that the expense account idea is exactly the same thing. I do not oppose that idea. I would move that we do look into the possibility of a minimal expense account per month on a flat basis
For everybody.
for everybody.
The motion made and seconded by Mrs. Crony and Mr. Sheffield is to look into the possibility of providing for a monthly expense account. When you say look into, you mean...
I would check and see whether some of the folks on the Assembly would feel that that was reasonable. I would only feel about it and see and come back and report to you.
And you would be the feeler.
If you felt that it was a reasonable thing to check on.
I think I feel.
Yes, everyone does.
I have no concept of how much is involved, but I think we have some flexibility in our own budget if we can keep it in-house. It might cost less.
So, the question really is then whether the commission will vote so that...
I do have one other thing in relation to this. If the charter should fail and it ran over into next year, I think that it should definitely be in the Assembly's budget. It will have to be approved this coming Wednesday to have something of this sort in. And it could be included under contingency. It wouldn't have to specifically speak to this, but it could raise the amount under contingency.
I'm sorry, I'd like to state the question as I understand it.
Yes.
And that, the motion is to, that the commission needs to be stated by name, Mary.
Yes, briefly.
That the commission authorized Mrs. Crony to explore with the borough administration and assembly the possibility of a minimal monthly expense allowance for charter commission. Is that correct?
That
Mr. Fisher, to that motion?
I would submit the rules to the
Roads.
Mr. Chairman, and I would also submit that if someone cares to make a motion that we reimburse for actual expenses, that I have no objection to a monthly expense account is nothing more than less than salary.
Was there a second?
Mr. Sheffield seconded the motion.
Did you second that?
Yes.
Mr. Chai.
I would speak against it on the basis that, using Mary's own words, if we have to go for a second go-around on this thing, I think that would be the time for us to go in and undo the mistake we made in the beginning I mean, we're this far down the road, we're just talking about a couple of more meetings that are going to come up, maybe 8 or so, and all that. And I think on the second go-around, we'll ask for compensation, but I think we're out of our tree if we're asking for it on this go-around.
I would thoroughly agree with Mr. Chai, so long as he intends to do a lot of the daytime work necessary to bring us to our timetable, or suggest that we amend the timetable.
I can do that.
I mean, I'm not suggesting that I won't, but I'd like to see more of the burden picked up by other commissioners for daytime things, if we're going to meet the timetable.
I'll do my part as soon as the legislature. Well, again, Sherry, as Mr. Fisher has pointed out, I mean, it's an imposition on us during the day because we all have
Everybody.
situations. And a nighttime thing is more preferable now.
The problem with the nighttime thing is that as we've gone through the calendar, we've not been able to get a quorum on many nights of the week, and we've set a date
We
for
met every
ourselves.
night of the week that was available.
And we've met, I mean, in a 1 month period, we met an average of 8 times a week. Well, there are not 8 nights in a week. And if you take off a couple of nights when lots of people are out of town and have other programs, there are not the nights available to do these things. So,
I mean, you're concerned about reimbursing a babysitter, but to some of the people during the day, it can be a very costly matter to drop a business deal to come over and do something like this.
Mr. Fisher, could I suggest that the government, I would very much like to get into this issue, but I don't think it would be appropriate. The issue of the whole concept of how we've gone about doing this charter. Well,
Are you ready for the question on Mrs. Froney's motion? Do you understand the question? If so, will the secretary call the roll on Mrs. Froney's motion?
Okay, we begin with Chai.
Opposed?
Fisher? Brody?
Yes.
Holmes? Yes. Joseph?
Yes.
Parker? No. Sheffield?
Yes.
Sturgeon?
Yes.
And for the record, Andrew? Yes. 5 in favor, 3 opposed. No, excuse, yes.
5 in favor, 3 opposed, and I think this motion is covered by our rule requiring 6 secretaries. In that event, the motion fails. Is there anything else under this item to be taken out?
Yes.
Mrs. Froney?
If the Charter Commission lasts over, then it must be put into the budget and somehow if we wish the Charter Commission to be paid on the second go-around. Now, the last date for that to be done is this next Wednesday. We have done the major portion of the budget last night, up until about 1:30 in the morning. We're going to have another go-around Wednesday, and at that date it's set. And if we want Charter Commission, if it goes for a second year, to have any compensation, now is the time to tell the Assembly about how much you want.
Let me see if this might get 6 votes. It occurs to me that maybe one solution would be to either by motion to the Assembly, by request of the Assembly, or within the limitations of our own budget, allow for reimbursement of actual expenses, including child care expenses, not to exceed $50 per month on presentation of evidence satisfactory to the Secretary and the Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I think you ought to ask how much he spent a month on babysitting before you set that lower limit. I don't think you can even take care of a week and a half's worth of babysitting.
Mr. Chairman, that's true, but not all the babysitting that I've had has been for the Charter Commission. While I do spend about $130 a month on daytime babysitters, I can't justify even.
I'm trying to eliminate a hard. We can make the motion, because then I can't make the motion.
I would second.
And the motion before you now is to
to authorize reimbursement for actual shown expenses not to exceed $50 per month, including child care. Are you
Wait
ready
a
for the
minute.
question?
I want to know whether this applies for now or whether you're talking about next year. I mean, next go around.
Intentionally motion was making now.
It applies immediately, prospectively.
All right, immediately. All right.
Did you hear me there?
Yes.
Retro, effective May 1? Effective May 1? Wrong. Now,
We actually have a second finance on
did the second agree with that?
I disagree with that.
Okay, you want to change that?
Okay.
What do you want to do?
June 1.
Okay, June 1, June 1. Very well. You've heard the motion. Are you ready for the question on the motion? Do you understand the motion? If so,
What's the motion?
the motion is to authorize reimbursement to individual commissioners up to $50 per month for their actual out-of-pocket expenses, including child care expenses, attributable to their work on the commission and manifested to the satisfaction of the secretary and the chairman.
Notarized.
Very well. The question is on this motion as I've stated it, and if you're ready for the question, the secretary will call.
Fisher,
Yes.
Crowley,
Yes.
Paul? Yes. Taylor?
Yes.
Parker? Carson? Excuse me. Sheffield?
Yes.
Sergioski? Yes. Chai?
Opposed?
One
6
moment.
in favor, 2 opposed.
6 in favor, 2 opposed. That motion is adopted. Mr. Fisher.
Can I ask a question, Mary, as on the Assembly's question?
Hmm?
How much is the Assembly president paid?
What?
How much is the Assembly president paid?
$50 a meeting on regular meetings, $25 on special meetings, and $300 a month expense account.
Mr. Chairman, may we move on to the next?
We may. The orders of the day are called.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Mary
Chairman,
brought up a very
I would like
point here.
I would like to propose that if the first charter fails and the charter continues on, that we ask the Assembly to set aside enough money for $35 for regular meetings and $25 for special meetings for the ensuing year.
Second.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Fisher, why are we any less, why should we be compensated any less than the Assembly? I mean,
No, but let me ask, why should our compensation begin when the voters reject our product? I mean,
All right.
I just, that's an idea. That way, I should reward. That way we'll compel you to accept it because
No.
We've lost our own.
Mary, I mean, it seems to me first.
There is one thing about putting in 6 months concentrated effort without pay. There's another thing about putting in 2 years of concentrated effort without pay. And it is on this point that I'm speaking to this to request the Assembly to put it in the budget so that we may be paid if the thing goes another year and a half. I don't know about you, but I do think we made a mistake at the beginning, and I think that is the time at which it should be compensated. And I do not think that there is any derogatory effect by asking the Assembly to include that item in their contingency fund just in case.
Okay. You've made a motion to that effect.
Yes, I made a motion. suggested $35 for regular meetings and $25 for the special meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, getting back to your point about, the vote is rejected, why should we ask for pay? Because if that happens, our job is doubly difficult than it has been in the past. We really have to start with a completely brand new charter with a new approach, and don't call for more meetings than we've ever had. So there's every justification in correct the first mistake.
Mr. Fisher, I'd like to amend the motion to make $50 per month, $50 for regular meeting, $25 for special. The amendment is offered to add...
It's seconded, sir.
I recognize that. I'm stating it. The amendment is offered to add a $300 per month allowance. Is there a second to the amendment? No, and change the... to 50 and 25. Same as, this is the assembly design, right? Okay. Is there a second to Mr. Fisher's amendment? Hearing none,
I would like to offer a motion.
Mr. Fisher's amendment died for lack of second. Mr. Sheffield?
I'd like to move to change the $35 for the regular meetings to 50, special meetings to 25.
Second.
The amendment is to increase the requested compensation for regular meetings from $35 to $50. Is there discussion of the amendment?
I see no objection one way or the other to that.
Is there objection to the amendment? There being none, the amendment is approved. Are you ready for the question as amended? Question is to request of the Assembly that in the event of a failure of the charter, that the Assembly, that the Commission be provided for on a contingency basis, compensation of $50 and thereafter for regular meetings and $25 for special. Mr. John Fisher.
This worries me a little bit for the same reason that the original proposal I made back, I think the night of our first meeting, was that we asked the Assembly to set our compensation, and that was my proposal. And it was the only one that had me, and I couldn't get any support for it. And I'd kind of like to do the same thing here, and let the Assembly, I think it's appropriate that they set our compensation. I'm going to try an amendment to that effect, that instead of mentioning any definite sum, we recommend the Assembly put an appropriate sum in the budget to be determined by them.
Seconded by Ms. Parker. The amendment by Mr. Fisher, seconded by Mr. Parker, would delete the figures in the request and request instead that a sum determined by the Assembly as appropriate be reserved for that purpose, so that an amount they determine will be paid to us. Mrs. Holmes?
I want to ask Mr. Fisher, does this, in your mind, then make us, put us in a better light in that we're not setting our own salaries, that we're asking someone else to do it for us?
Take the onus off.
Yeah, there the two things that I see, there's that issue and the other one, the power balance between the Assembly and us and all of that. I would support Mr. Fisher's motion.
Is there objection to Mr. Fisher's amendment? Hearing none, Mr. Fisher's amendment is adopted. You now have the amended motion to request the Assembly to provide for funding of the Charter Commission in the event that we work after the defeat of the first charter election. You ready for the question on that?
Question.
Is there objection to that motion? If not, that motion is adopted. Is there anything else to come before us on the matter of compensation?
Mr. Chairman, the only comment I would make that someone needs to take action to see that this information is transmitted to the Assembly. Their final action is on the 28th, which is next Wednesday.
Well, that's sort of on the next
Right.
thing.
Threat to the voters is fine. This pay for it. Put that in this survey. What would you pleasure?
It matters not, either way. I'll handle it if you wish. If you want to officially go to it, go to it. And I think officially is probably the better way.
Wednesday night? Well, why don't we say that?
You could just as well send a letter to the president and one to each of the assembly members saying the duplicate thing.
Let's state then that I'll communicate by letter.
And if Evie delivered it tomorrow, it could be hand-delivered to the assemblymen, and they would not get it with their packets, which are probably out today, but...
Let's move on then to the presentation of the budget proposal.
It's self-explanatory, I think, except in that it does not include in the September 1 through June 30 amount anything specifically for salaries, because I was told that was something that the borough carries in their own budget. It would, if it did come up, it would be a contingency item from the borough, not something that we would ask for in a budget. This had to be put together in literally a half an hour. That was how much time we had. The budget for July 1 through September 1 is very much close to what was given to me. The same for the second half. It's a little bit more. I think it's $500 more done on an estimating basis than what was given as the proposed draft for our second phase budget. And that's what you have at the back of the proposed.
Ms. Chief,
It's all gap work.
I have two questions. One as to a specific, well, the more important question is, this budget covers the July 1 to September 1 of 1975. I'm wondering why we're saying September 1, 1975, and what does happen in the event of a charter failure?
All right, I chose those dates because those were the dates that were imposed on me by the previous request and previous proposal, which is...
I'm aware of that, but I think we need to speak to that.
Yeah,
All right.
well, you're welcome.
We certainly do.
That was just the figures I used in coming up with these figures for the 43,000 was those 3 months.
Mr. Chairman, if the charter goes down in August, and if the courts have not come to a decision, I am wondering whether this body wishes to put themselves up for ballot again in October, if the charter went down in August, to clear up any possible objections. I'm just asking a question. I'm just wanting to know what the...
I'd suggest that that's an issue we have to discuss at another time. It's likely to run rather long, and I think we ought to have our attorney present when we discuss them.
All right. Is there any action to be taken on this budget?
No, I don't believe so. That's just to tell you that's what we told the borough.
Mr.
I disagree with the figure down here, 32,000.
Yes. This figure then has gone that we would make an actual request for 43,000 and they would put some 32,000 in the contingency fund. Is that correct, Mrs. Burley?
I'm not quite sure. Aren't you in the... This is from July 1st to September 1st to 75. Now, if we start out at September 1st, going on a new go-round, the total from September 1st to the next October 11th, I would think would be something very similar to what we have spent this time, plus some salary. Because we'll have to go through the process of publication again, we'll have to go through the process of advertising again, we'll have to go through the whole process again, and I think that it will have the added cost of whatever the assembly decides for compensation.
I was assuming that any second draft, second charter would not come up needing printing and publishing or public information campaign until after the next fiscal year. And therefore, there would be a third budget in it.
Now, if you're saying until July 1, I accept the probability of this.
Well, that's what it
But
says. June 30th,
All right.
76. Yeah.
right.
Mr. Chairman, then one more question.
You still have the advertising of the hearing.
Well, they all gave you $1,000.
Chair recognizes Mr.
All right. Then the other question. Your comment on public information campaign fund, I think that's perhaps somewhat of a poor choice of words. What are we anticipating in campaign
Oh,
fund?
okay. That was a simple matter of talking on the phone with a couple of commissioners and saying, what am I supposed to put in here for the information campaign that we have said that we would carry on?
Public information.
It was strictly a guess, it's certainly not going to be totally, I'm sorry.
It's not the amount that's an issue.
It's really the wording.
It's not supposed to change anything.
It's already gone in though, isn't it?
Oh, no. All I gave to Mrs. Person was the strict 75,000. I told her that's how I felt. This breakdown is strictly
If
for our
there's no
information.
objection, if that campaign, just public information
Change the program.
program or something appropriate.
Yeah, no problem at all. This has not gone to anyone but the
Fine,
commission.
thank
Now,
you.
what's the possibility, let's assume that the charter does fail. What's the legal possibility that the assembly might not want to fund this at all? And say the voters have spoken and, 83% voted no and you're discharged. What, are they required to keep
There's
this?
no matter of discharge.
For 1 year?
I researched that issue. Assembly doesn't make a choice. We spend the money, they agree to do it.
Really is.
For 1 year from what point?
It's for 2 years and 2 charters.
The date of the election.
And they must pay our bills or
Mr. Chairman, what is the status of the 75,000 request? Could it be changed at this point?
Yes. Yes, it could.
Mr. Chairman, I'm leery that it isn't enough. I really am concerned because we don't know whether or not we propose, if it does fail, whether we propose the charter for election ballot prior to June 30th.
Yeah, the amount is 3/4 for a 9-month period of what we would be spending in a 3-month.
If, I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that we make it 100,000, and I think that might be a lot closer. And this is what they're after, is an estimate.
Are you moving to that?
Oh, is it necessary?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second it. The motion is made, I second it, that the budget request for fiscal 76, our fiscal 76, I'm not speaking of be $100,000. Is there discussion of that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I feel it's a great deal of money, but I think it's a more realistic fund. And
As I said, it did not
We don't
address
have
the
to
matter of
spend it.
compensation at all. So,
Now,
And it still doesn't.
not really.
And it still doesn't.
I'll support the motion.
Is there objection to Mr. Fisher's motion? If not, Mr. Fisher's motion is adopted. How is that transmitted to the borough?
I assume
By you?
it would go by letter in the
By
same letter.
Same letter that you're,
Very well.
Carefully
That you were drafting, learning carefully.
Joe can on that.
Letter. Carefully worded.
You guys are picking on the wording I do at 5:30. That isn't fair.
All right. Is there anything else? Everything under item 5C.
So,
What do we have under 5D? Public relations build-up calendar.
let me just give you a couple things. Today, we were asked by KENI TV to do a running series regarding the entire charter, item by item, issue by issue. Mrs. Mrs. Holmes wants to speak to that, I think.
Mr. Chairman, I was contacted at 1 o'clock and asked if at 3 o'clock I could do the first taping, and did. Mr. Seberg has suggested that he would like me to go on tomorrow afternoon and then to start with some other commissioners. I think it's more appropriate that someone else go on tomorrow afternoon. What he intends to do is have a series of programs, 8 or 10 of them maybe, on the different aspects of the charter, about 3 to 4 minutes in length, 3 or 4 times a week. That would mean that we could each appear, and I think it's kind of important that we become known in the community, and we each bring a slightly different interpretation to some of these things, and method of presentation, everything. So I would like, the next date is 3 o'clock tomorrow, and I would like Evie to work out a schedule then with the other commissioners for the remaining weeks. Essentially, he will continue this spot on his program as long as we can fill it up with good information. We could go on for a month, and it goes on the 6:30 news. You know, we could go on until the election, so long as we can give him good material. So I'd like to do it rotatingly.
And the borough, by the way, is doing it too, in much the sense as you had said, shouldn't there be TV time for publicizing when the Macon thing was on the end?
For what?
For publicizing borough activities. It's a new segment of the TV news. The other TV thing that I have to bring up.
Well, I'm here in town.
Get Mr. Jones.
Okay, then I'll set up a schedule.
Okay, I'll go on and talk about now. Should I talk about equal rights or the ombudsman?
I've set you up for what, you haven't started at the beginning of the charter, and start going through the name of the
handle the name of the municipality.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could we have Evie set up a specific schedule of topics and times and possibly call at appropriate time to
For
alert?
things that you're interested in.
Joe, let me talk with you about how he does his program.
The other TV thing is you had asked me to contact KAKM, the public TV station, which I have finally managed to reach Mr. Jackson at, and I explained that we were in a position to try to tape it ourselves. He said that although they have very limited facilities, he feels that it is definitely within the province of what they should be doing. He thinks that if it's an iffy thing, they may even be able to pay for it themselves, but in the event that they would need some of our processing money, could we pay it? But that they could tape it at their studio, and they'd be delighted to have it, provided we set up a program. He thinks that we should bring in a moderator who is not one of us, and he will look to finding someone for that purpose too. I suggested mid-June would be a good time, since they're just getting rolling, and so we'll proceed with that.
May I suggest Miller Keller and Sandy Stark
Okay.
as two possible
I'll give him that.
informed
that
moderators?
info. But I thought it was very nice, since we had offered to do our own taping and everything, that he said, no, we'd like to go ahead and try to be big boys about this.
Anything else on that?
Well, no, only except that I intend from now on to be concentrating more on public relations than I am on these other things. I had a couple crank calls today. One from Mr. Barnum in Spinard, who said that you would not be happy to hear that he had called, wondering why the commission, wondering why we would want to continue with this farce when it had been voted down 3-1 in the last election. And he wanted to know who had initiated the petition for this particular charter commission to be brought up. Another was a more useful comment from Jewel Mason saying that maybe we had not booked a large enough space at Chugach Elementary, since that's the only downtown public hearing. And so I have made a contingency to use the multipurpose room in the event that we don't have enough space.
Okay. Anything else under public relations? Thank you.
Just one little aside, Evie, could you strike my husband's work number from telephone numbers that go out to the public?
Okay. I apologize.
No, that's...
Well, could you strike my home number?
I did talk this over very carefully with Jim and a couple of the commissioners. I couldn't reach you all, but I felt that as public commissioners, you should have public numbers. What I used plain and simply with the list that was given to me by the borough.
I'm super easy to contact.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I don't think I necessarily want my home folder. Take a look at the phone book.
One number is probably.
Let's get enough, we get enough prank calls.
I doubt that I would.
Without having publicized in front of pages.
If we can move forward then, we have an item called Keller's Committee.
Which is not related to the Ku Klux Klan. I just will announce that Millet Keller's Unification Group under a new name, which I don't know, has started up again. And we went to a meeting last Tuesday. I think another one will be in 2 weeks.
I do want these, I'm sorry, this calendar got a little hung up at 5 again, but I do want something like this to rely on from each of you that lists for me the times you are absolutely not available to be used for public relations.
Is there any new business? Any committee reports? No one to be heard? Comments by commissioners? The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Phone.